32.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, I'd like to call the Planning Commission for the town of McCandless to order. First item on the agenda, as I have it, is the preliminary and final approval of a subdivision application for the plan known as Dixon Consolidation Plan for Theodore and Deborah Dixon. Property is located at 8419 Perry Highway.
Did you get the latest version of the agenda?
Probably not.
That's September's. That's September's.
This is September. This is September.
No, this is October.
Yes, I was going to say this is the September
Sorry.
agenda.
That's where I thought we were
I
going,
don't
but
think
we
I have. Did that come in my packet?
it should have. Hang on. Let me see if I can send it to you now, just in case.
You just want to put it on the screen, RJ? I mean, we can just.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I can do that. And, all right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. First item
If
is
I-
the staff update on zoning amendments previously reviewed by the commission.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give everyone sort of a quick overview. I know we've had 3, maybe 4 amendments coming through here in the last couple months, a lot of moving parts. So for the 5G, small wireless communication facilities, many names that it's gone by, that ordinance passed, I believe, in the same form that the Planning Commission, the last time you all saw it, and recommended its approval. Council did adopt that. The animal ordinance that had the subcommittee that then came out to Planning Commission, what staff ended up doing was recommending that that actually be split into 2 ordinances. One, just dealing with the household pets, accessory use language, and the other one dealing just with the keeping of backyard chickens. We felt like, the public might have some feedback more so on one topic, other groups might have more feedback on the other topic, and it just made sense to advertise and consider them separately, sort of once we started getting an idea of what maybe the community feedback and feel was. So the household pets side of the animal ordinance, I think there were a couple minor changes with language, an update to a section reference, possibly in the Pennsylvania dog law. Just with those couple minor changes, that was adopted, I believe, at the last council meeting, actually. At the last council meeting, we also had the public hearing on the keeping of chickens ordinance. There were just a few formatting changes from, before we had just put it in section 1341, which is uses. That's typically reserved for if something is just a conditional use or a special exception, rather than being permitted potentially as an accessory use, and the coop is an accessory structure. So I ended up moving that into each of the district chapters, just so again it's clear, which districts it applies to, and that it's functioning under the accessory use language and permitting instead of, say a conditional use, something like that. That actually, we got some feedback from the public. There were some folks that had some concerns about the setbacks and how they would actually impact properties, and coop design, coop location, different things like that, that council is looking at making some changes that are substantial enough that we're gonna have to kick it back to the county for review, assuming that those changes are moved forward with. So that one, actually, it was kind of fortuitous. We were working on the administrative side on a new engagement platform website. It's hosted on something called Engagement HQ. It's by a company named Bang the Table. They're focused on, again, public engagement, kind of innovation, different ways for the local government administration and officials to connect with public opinion. So we launched the site with some chicken activities. Again, given the community conversation has been sort of focused on setbacks, functionally how they would impact people interested in keeping chickens, some of the coop design standards, we put a couple different activities up there to give opportunities for feedback. You know, put a pin on the map if you would like to have chickens, so that we can get an idea of maybe what the setbacks would theoretically be if these types of properties were included. Show us your coop mood board. You know, put a photo of what you would like to have as a chicken coop if you were to have one. So again, we can sort of compare what council may feel the best regulations are for those versus what maybe some ideas are in the community for what they'd like to do and if they line up. So, you know, currently that's sort of open-ended with the goal of, you know, I'm going to compile the data we get from that, bring it back to council, you know, whatever revisions they want to go from there, that will go back to the county. So that one's a little bit of a longer timeline, but I think that we're getting some really good feedback as a result of the way that we're approaching it right now. So I think that's all, yeah, all three. And then we've got the oil and gas on for final discussion today. So just figured, since everyone always asks, we might as well let you know where we're at with all those.
Thank you.
Any questions, or did I talk long enough about the chickens?
No.
All right, that's all I got.
Okay. I guess we move on to the dialysis clinic then, right?
Yes. If you don't mind, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see who's
That's
in here
fine.
to turn their mics on.
There we go.
Okay. I see, oh, there's Kaylee. All right. Kaylee, if you could please tell me who else I need to unmute here.
Michael.
Yeah, you could unmute Michael Takis, Kayla Sloan,
Okay.
Patty Gauntner, and Ira Chilton, I think. Should be everyone.
I think I found them all. Sorry, did you say it was Kayla Sloan?
Yeah, I think it's like K Sloan 94 on there.
I missed all the names. All right. Let's see, I've got Patty and Ira. They're both unmuted. Guys, it's up to you if you want to start your video, but just for reference, the recording will only show you when you're speaking if you have your camera on.
Great, thank you so much, RJ. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kaylee Bevington. I'm a senior design engineer with Bowler. I'm here on behalf of Dialysis Clinic, Inc. to present our application for land development to you guys and answer any questions you might have about this development. Like I just said here a minute ago, here with me tonight is Michael Takis. He's also from Bowler. Kayla Sloan, she's with Projects, as well as Ira Chilton. They're both with Projects. That's the project architect. And Patty Gauntner is with DCI themselves. So I'll do a quick presentation for you all, and then we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let me see if I can get my screen to share.
While you're doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and just sort of give a brief overview to the group. So you all saw, I believe you were sent the paper copies of the plans, Sandy said at the beginning of the month. Since then, there were some revisions with stormwater, a couple other things going on in the lot. However, in the second pass of review between myself and the town engineers, there were just some thoughts that we had about the stormwater system that we've suggested maybe approaching, tying in to the storm sewer potentially at the neighboring Howard Hanna. Just for reference, again, this is this is pretty much adjacent to the Howard Hanna that's on the one corner there in the RC district. So just based on, you know, sort of the feedback from the town engineer, we've suggested they take a second look at the stormwater approach and see if maybe they can tie in directly to the storm system rather than having any of the infiltration coming from the back of the property towards the residences back there. So at this point, you know, we had them on the agenda to present the application in general. We thought, well, we might as well, you know, still bring them in and have a conversation about the other aspects of the plan. So if there's any feedback from the group, they can incorporate that into their second look, you know, while they're taking a second look at the stormwater. They can also, you know, consider anything that might come up at this meeting so we can still keep the process going. If there's anything else, Kaylee, that I should have covered there, we got it.
No, I think you covered it. Thank you.
All right.
It's telling me I
and,
can't share
of
my
course,
screen.
sorry, just, but Dan Dizeroth from Gateway Engineers is also here if we have any engineer-specific questions that come out of this. Okay, now I'm done.
Thanks, RJ. It's telling me I can't share my screen, or that's been
Oh.
disabled.
Yeah, hang on. Have you got a PowerPoint over here?
I have it's a PDF presentation.
Okay, here, try it now.
Yep, looks like that'll work.
All right.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Great.
Yep. Very good.
Okay, so thank you, RJ, again for that introduction. That kind of works nicely here for us. You're probably all familiar with this site. It's on Perry Highway, right next to the Howard Hanna property. And kind of going in at the same time as this application will also be a lot consolidation plan. This is currently 3 parcels, and we will be proposing to consolidate them into 1 parcel.
And this is the Dixon consolidation plan that you were seeing potentially from last month, Ted, just FYI.
Mhm. Right.
So while it's 2 separate applications, it's all kind of working together as one package. Dialysis Clinic is a nonprofit service organization. They provide care to patients with end-stage renal disease. They have clinics all over the country, including several in the greater Pittsburgh area. DCI is proposing to develop this approximately 2.14 acres of land located at 8443 Perry Highway. They'll be developing a dialysis clinic. That's approximately 9,900 square feet. The site is currently 3 parcels, like I said. Most of the site is currently undeveloped, except for 1 single family home and gravel driveway, which you'll see here shortly. I'll show you an existing conditions plan. The project will include installation of utilities, landscaping, storm sewer, all necessary to support the redevelopment. This here is just an aerial image to kind of give you a frame of reference. This here, if you can see my mouse, is the Howard Hanna site. Behind the site is residential properties. This is Montclair Avenue. It's not showing up in here, but the Sheets is up to the north of here. These are just some site images from Google Earth. This would be heading north on Perry Highway. You can see this is the corner of the Howard Hanna building. This is the site we're discussing. This is the other end of the site. If you were headed south, this is that one, the house that is currently on the site. This is the survey of the existing conditions of the property. You can see the gravel drive here. This is that residence. And this is what the site would look like once it's consolidated. Pretty straightforward. There is a sanitary easement, which we will be working with the authority to vacate. So this is our proposed site. The clinic will have 24 treatment stations. I believe they receive patients from both ambulances and personal vehicles. The typical hours for the location are 5 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You can see this is the main access point here off Perry Highway. This is pretty much the same location that an existing gravel drive is today. We will be obtaining an HOP with PennDOT for this curb cut and eliminating the other access points that are there today. There's also a connection at the back of the property to the Howard Hanna property. That is a requirement of the code. And there was an easement shown on the development plans for the Howard Hanna property for this connection. The connection is not to serve as general, it's not part of the overall circulation for the site, but it is required as part of this development.
RJ, can you tell me why that's required? I mean, what's the,
It's in the RC district code.
what does it?
The purpose of it, Rob, was to keep traffic. The thought was when that area was developed that there would be compatible uses that people might want to get from one site to the other. And then you wouldn't have to get back out on the Perry Highway to do that.
Mhm.
Well, that's not the case here, right? These are not,
Yeah, we have an
I
auto
mean,
parts dealership, yeah, a retail, a residential, or a real estate dealer and now a dialysis clinic. But I mean, that was the intent.
get the intent, but it's the reality that we have. I mean, it seems to me it's silly because you're going to lose spaces now in the Howard Hanna parking area and potentially encourage people to cut through there if they wanted to. So I don't know. I'm just speaking for me. It seems counterproductive personally, but that's my 2 cents. But go ahead.
Okay, so like RJ just said, this is in the residential commercial district in McCandless. This is a permitted by right within that district. The required parking for this development will be 34 spaces. We do have 42 available to them, which fits in with their overall program. As far as stormwater is concerned, since RJ touched on that in the beginning, we have 3 facilities proposed on this site. 2 are above ground. 1 is located here on the north side of the building. 1 is located here along Perry Highway. Those are both above ground. And then we have a below ground system in this back loading area. This system outflows to, so the current drainage areas, some of the drainage stormwater goes off to this side towards these residential properties, and some of the drainage goes onto Perry Highway. That's how the site is divided today. So to mimic that watershed, we have this facility outflowing in this direction, and we have these 2 above ground facilities outletting towards Perry Highway.
Is that it?
Do a couple more. I have a couple more slides for you. So
Okay, go ahead.
These are elevations provided by the architect. Pretty self-explanatory. We have all the sides of the building covered here.
What
materials?
materials are they? Yeah, let's say I didn't see these before. I don't know if anybody else did. But
No, I didn't.
No.
It's, Kayla, if you don't mind, I'll speak to the.
Yeah, no, go right ahead, Kayla.
So it's primarily ephes, and then we're going to do a stone, kind of like a ledge stone veneer around the bottom, and then up on the fake columns on the front too. So those are the 2 primary materials. And then we have the aluminum cantilever canopies along the front and actually along all sides of the building. And that is the extent of the finishes on the outside.
can you bring this back to us in color so we can have a better context of what this looks like?
I can, yes. I do have a colored version that has been done since then. So I can send that to Kaylee to pass on to you all.
Okay, that'd be great because it's tough to get any idea what this looks like besides black and white. Thank you.
So as part of this development, we will be asking for 3 modifications from the code. We can discuss them here tonight. I'll go through each of them and then we can go over any questions you might have. The first is in reference to Township Ordinance 913.16.a.3.e. This ordinance states that all infiltration facilities shall be set back at least 20 feet from all structures with subgrade elements. So that part of the ordinance is tied to this facility here, the one that's just north of the building. It is within that 20 feet mark. However, this facility will not be designed to be infiltration. It will be designed as a bioretention area with an MRC release. So it will have plantings in it and a modified soil. And then to help address any concerns with being within that 20 feet, we will propose to install an impermeable liner within that facility to just make sure that we don't have any infiltration around the building foundation.
And what's the depth of that versus the adjacent sidewalk? I can't read the contours on there, so.
I believe it's 5 feet. The bottom would be 5 feet down.
If I stepped off the edge of the sidewalk there, it's going to slope right down into that.
Yeah, this is a 3-to-1 slope here. This isn't sidewalk here though. The sidewalk is over here, and then
Oh, I
across.
saw the door there. I figured there was a sidewalk.
Yeah, I believe, I don't, Caleb, is this just emergency egress here?
That,
Yeah.
yes, that should be just emergency egress off of the treatment floor.
But you still have to give them some way to get away from the building, don't you? Wouldn't you want a sidewalk there so they could get away safely?
That wasn't part of our plan as it is right now. Most of the pedestrians should be coming from the parking area and utilizing these crosswalks here, but I understand about emergency egress. We will put a concrete pad there.
I see the pad, but if there's 2 feet of snow there, what are they doing? I mean,
Yeah, where are they gonna go?
yeah, you kind of just run over the edge. I mean, okay,
I mean, there's 7 feet of flat space here. It's just not dedicated sidewalk.
again, I get that, but if there's snow on the ground or it's muddy and wet, people, I mean, why wouldn't you put a sidewalk there to connect it to something so that people can safely travel away?
And you're gonna need a railing there too.
Yeah,
We can put a sidewalk there. There's not a problem. If a sidewalk is desired, we can put a sidewalk there. It is just emergency egress. It won't be used for any kind of service or anything. If there's an emergency and they have to egress the building, it'll be used and we can put a sidewalk there. As far as the 3-to-1 slope, I think it'll be gradual enough that from the building code standpoint, it probably won't require a railing, but if you desire a railing, we will put a railing.
Well, I have a question, because some of your patients, while they're undergoing dialysis, they're gonna be on a bed. And they need to evacuate the building at all. They're never gonna get out of there.
They don't dialyze in a bed, sir.
They don't?
No, they don't. They
So they're
dialyze.
so they're ambulatory all the time.
No, but they dialyze in recliner chairs.
But they're ambulatory?
Not all.
Well, so what's the difference whether you're in a chair or they can't move? You're going to get whatever they're contained on, you're going to get through that door? I don't think so.
Well, the ones that are not ambulatory will be assisted in a lot of them are ambulatory. So the ones that are not ambulatory.
Yeah, but if I'm not, I want.
You would be evacuated in a wheelchair.
so again, don't you want to have a sidewalk there? So if somebody's getting pushed out in a wheelchair, they got a way to get away.
Yeah,
Yes,
There's got to be a big door.
just the other thing is from a code standpoint, not all doors are judged the same, and not all egress points are. There are points of egress that do not require sidewalks around most buildings, and it all depends upon the distance from other points of egress as to whether those actually require full accessibility, or whether it's, in a lot of cases, they're called points of rescue, where you get out of the building and are then taken from that spot. But as Ira had said, if the township desires a sidewalk there, we're not going to argue. We're just trying to explain why there isn't one there now, because by code it's simply a point of getting outside of the building, not necessarily a point where you have to have a path connected to it from a code standpoint.
We've got 2 other exits that have access to what they call a public right of way, meaning they go out to asphalt all the way. But
Right.
those other 2
And
exits,
not to
letter of the
beat
code.
a dead horse here.
I understand why you want the concrete there.
Well, my contention is that if you have an emergency escape door there, it should be such a door that if somebody is on a wheelchair and they're taking that door and they go, oops, I can't get through there. That's not good. So whatever exit you have should be able to handle any patient. That's my feeling.
Okay.
I think that would be,
And
wouldn't
once
it
they
be,
get out of there, you're not going to want them to hug the side of the building. They need a way to get away from that building. Besides
Would-
sliding down into the pit there.
Maybe some of this depends on what the evacuation plan is for the building. I don't know what the interior of that building holds that the people would evacuate out that door. I'm not sure if the patients are in that part of the building or they're in a different part of the building, so that their emergency evacuation plan would take them out a bigger door, and that is like where only the people cleaning equipment would be and they are fully functional. I don't know. Does that make any
But, yeah.
difference what the evacuation plan is?
Yeah, but they would, if there's an emergency, they're not going to say, oh, I can't use that door. I have to go find another door. It, you know, you really
Yeah,
got to have it set down in stone for patients that are in that building to get out. If they have.
We have no
Probably
problem. We have no problem putting the walk in, and I can understand why you would want it with the snow and everything.
Okay.
The building, if you look at the building code and you do the calculation, the building by code can hold 99 people. We will never have, but at maximum, half of that many people in the building. But the way we have to calculate the egresses, we have to base it on if there were 99 people in that building because of the size of the building.
I also want to say too, that door, that is the emergency egress door, it is 4 feet wide as well. So they can, if we do put the walk-in like we're talking about, the chairs can fit through that door too. So whatever, you know, if they're in a wheelchair, if they end up pushing the recliners, they will fit through that door.
That's great. That's great. But then also, where do they go once they're out the door? How many people you have coming out of that door? If you've got 5 people coming out of that door, there's no room.
Is there an issue with the scale there? If that's a 4 foot wide door, wasn't there a comment that that was a 7 foot wide area before you hit the slope down into the, call it the stormwater facility?
I think Kaylee had mentioned that it was 7 foot wide, or maybe Michael did, but you know, a hospital corridor is 8 foot wide, and you can pass two litters past each other in a hospital corridor. So a 7 foot wide walk there would be easy to bring them out a 4 foot door, turn them to the right, and bring them out to the drive. And at that point, they've got public way access.
It just doesn't look like that. The door swinging there. If the door is 4 foot.
I'm not sure. That door is probably just a symbol showing that
Okay.
egress point.
Yeah, the door can be changed, size can be altered. That's not the issue. That can be done. But, you know, I'm concerned about where people are going to go when they get on that sidewalk.
Like the team said, we'll take a look at this area. That's part of the reason we're here tonight, is to get your feedback. So we'll take a look at it and we'll address your concerns there.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I had a couple of comments.
Sure.
When this zoning ordinance was passed, it was intended to merge or make residential and commercial buildings somewhat compatible with each other. And I think if you look at the 4 buildings to the south of you, they were all developed under this ordinance. They all had about a 35 to 40 foot setback from the road to the building. They all had front yards. And that was the intention of this ordinance. It almost looks like you've done everything that we didn't want to see done. You have parking in the front, which we didn't want. You have the building set back 100 feet, which is 3 times what the other buildings on the street are set back. And you have a connection to the south, which is a very difficult connection. It's very steep, but no connection to the north. And your stormwater facility is right in front of the building, where we were expecting to see a nice lawn and some landscaping. To me, I'm not sure. It just seems like everything is set up wrong on this project to begin with on the site plan.
Kaylee, do you have a closer up image, anything in color of the front of the property? Because this is the side that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can exit this.
I know you got to get out of your PowerPoint here.
That's okay. Where do you want me to show? You want me
Well,
to look
if we're discussing the front with a lawn, there's a lawn.
That's a, what do they call it? A stormwater detention pond.
What if that was a water garden?
It is designed to be a rain garden. That is what that facility is.
But right now,
That's not what our code calls for, though. Our code calls for a,
As far as I know, this all fits within the code. That concern about your intent, this is the first I've heard of it. I'm not sure. I know the architect spoke with Bruce Betty before about this project, and then we did have a pre-application meeting with RJ and Dan and discuss the project. I'm not sure what the intent was about lawn or setback from the road. That's the first I've heard of that concern.
well, I mean,
Well,
you can just take a
speaking
look
of
at the four
Dan-
buildings to the south. They're all set up basically the same.
Dan Dizeroff, just since we got a couple Dans on here.
Sure.
Did you identify anything in your engineering review that there would be a zoning issue with parking in the front?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I understand what Ted's saying, what the intent was, but I don't think there's anything within the code that prohibits it.
Yeah, and I think right across the street is that AMCO, like a car service station, right? I mean, there's obviously parking right in front of the
Those are
building.
grandfathered.
Well,
They've been there forever.
Predates it.
Okay.
Well, the AMCO,
In our
the AMCO
code, it
was
says
the
no
first.
vehicular parking is permitted within the front yard. The 35-foot front yard shall be grassed and landscaped.
Yeah, I think they're behind the 35 feet.
It's still in the front yard.
A parking lot's not a yard,
I know.
in my consideration anyway.
What we were trying to do, let me just back up. What we were trying to do, when this ordinance was passed, there were both residential and commercial buildings along this strip. Most of the residential buildings are gone on this side of the road, but there's still some on the other side of the road. And it was intended to try to have a similar feel throughout this area. And if you look at well, you can see on your little site plan here, you can see the Howard Hanna building to the south, where it has a very small front yard. The same thing is true if you went further south to the, Advanced Auto Parts building.
Yeah.
And then there's two buildings south of that are the same way. This seems to be a rather radical departure from that.
there's two things that are happening on this site that that on the two-dimensional drawing here doesn't show. There's an embankment along Perry Highway up to the site. So the site is actually vertically lifted from Perry Road. You can see it here. You see the front yard of the real estate neighbor, and then you can see the embankment there. That embankment is actually in the 30-foot the setback for the front yard. Also, across the street, directly across the street, is a relatively new building, and that building has its storm retention basin right in the front yard in the 30-foot setback, the best I could tell. Now, I did not go and measure it. I was eyeballing it when I toured the site.
I would bet that building predates this ordinance. But in any event, it seems to me that the right way to develop this, unless there's some reason it can't be, would be to lower the site a little bit. Not a whole lot, a couple feet. You can spread out a little dirt that way and get a little more property in your northwest corner. But it's almost like the building should be rotated 90 degrees and have the parking on the side somehow. this certainly doesn't match either Howard Hanna or Advance Auto in their approach. Howard Hanna put all their parking behind the building. I think Advance Auto, if I'm not mistaken, has parking beside their building.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're on the side.
it's on the side.
And then
Ted,
the two buildings below that, I think, have most of their parking behind the building. But
So
think
I
there's
also have, I also have a little concern, well, a concern with the driveway. I have gone and driven on that property. And if you will go back to your first picture that you were at before this one, do you mind going back to that, please?
This one here,
The next one up, I
this
think.
one.
Yes, yep, where you just were, just the two regular pictures.
Sorry, it's a little delayed.
That's okay. So if you see here, we're the southern part of that property. Look up that road. I had a very difficult time seeing when I pulled out of there because people crest over the hill and you don't see them to the last minute, and they really were picking up some speed there. Now that's the south end of that property, and the driveway, if it's going to be where the current driveway is at the north end of that property, and there is not much sight there. I mean, trying to get out there quick enough that to not get clobbered in my car. So that's the concern that I see, is having that to the north that people hill too quickly to get out.
And I will just mention here that, point well taken on the traffic. This would require a highway occupancy permit from PennDOT since it's on 19. So any aspects of the traffic, sight distance, volume, all that would need to also go through the state as well as us.
Yeah, and
It's hard to see. It's hard to see up that road, I'll tell you.
I believe there was a scoping meeting with PennDOT, and there's a traffic study being prepared. We've not
Yes.
seen it yet.
Yeah, that's correct. Our traffic engineer has met with PennDOT already and is working on a traffic impact assessment. So that will be fully coordinated with PennDOT.
But do you see what I was trying to say is trying to make this compatible with the other buildings on the street, particularly the new buildings on this side of the street.
And I took a look at the ordinance here while we were talking, and I think that there is a legitimate question about whether the ordinance compels the front yard to be a lawn versus just identifying there has to be 35 feet of grass.
Well,
Yeah, it's kind of
Section-
interesting in the front yard section. It calls out directly, and this is probably what you're looking at, Brendan. It says the 35-foot front yard shall be grassed and landscaped.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that it specifically states a dimension instead of just everything in front of the
the
building.
interpretation of that is that the parking is prohibited in the front yard. Some places you're allowed to park in the front yard in the community. I think the way they laid this out, it is set back, Kaylee, if I'm not mistaken, 35 feet, the parking.
Correct.
Yeah, so while I understand Ted's intent that, we would rather have parking in the rear, but I think this lot's a little bit different than the other ones. It's a little bit bigger and it's got more topographic challenges. I know that.
Well, they put their stormwater retention pond right in the front of the building. I don't think I've ever seen a particularly good looking stormwater retention pond. And it's certainly not grassed and landscaped. So that part, I don't think you can argue with.
It actually, it would be landscape. It would be planted with a permanent seed mix that would be able to be inundated. We use a bioretention mix that will fill that.
I've seen a lot of stormwater detention ponds, and almost none of them look particularly good.
You mean,
No-
are we
nobody
still talking
maintains
about
them
rain
is the big
gardens
problem.
here?
Pardon?
Are we still talking about rain gardens here or detention
Well,
ponds?
they don't show that as a rain garden. They call it a retention pond, which is a hole in the ground.
It's designed to be a bioretention area / rain garden. That is the intent of that stormwater facility.
But that still doesn't meet the code. It says the 35-foot front yard shall be grassed and landscaped. And then I
I guess that's
assume
up
we
for
haven't,
interpretation. We are, like Michael said, it will be landscaped.
well, we also then have, let me look here.
I
We
just
also
looked at
have,
it
we
saying-
also have requirements for trees and that sort of thing in our buffer yard requirements. I mean,
I don't know that there's.
I
a
just
buffer
don't think that
to Perry Highway though.
you looked at the adjacent properties at all. And, you know, it says, if you right in the front page, your first page of this zoning ordinance, it says specifically, these design standards were developed to reduce the contrast between commercial and residential structures and yards, sufficient to provide the harmony of atmosphere necessary for the welfare of affected residents. It seems to me that I mean, you're developing it more or less like you develop any property in any commercial district, as opposed to developing it for this district.
I mean, I would say we developed it based off of what's written in the code, as it's written.
Yeah, that's not
How
true.
can you say that though, when you have a retention pond in the front yard?
Because
There's also
it's
parking
not
in the front
prohibited.
yard, and the
It's not
code
prohibited.
says no vehicular parking is permitted within the front yard.
The front yard is defined as 35 feet from Perry
That's
Highway.
that's the minimum depth. I mean, there's a front yard, a rear yard, and a side.
35 feet is a setback.
It just doesn't seem that, to Ted's point, that it's compatible with the concept of the district of trying to merge residential and commercial, where you wouldn't have a massive parking in the front of existing residential structures that were there. That would seem to have been the intent of the ordinance, to try to weave in commercial that was somewhat consistent in scope to that.
So, a couple different items here in relation to this discussion. One is, when the engineers and I reviewed it, we did not interpret the parking as being in the front yard. Certainly the planning commission can make whatever recommendation it feels is appropriate on that issue, but that is not how we read it when we were reviewing the plan. Now, of course, I certainly wasn't here in the inception of the RC district, because that was passed in 1994, and I was not finished with grad school in 1994. So I was not here. However, the way that I would read section B under the purpose is really that it's more speaking to the fact that the district is bordered on both the, I suppose, west and east side with residences. You know, they're going to be backing up onto any sort of commercial property that's developed there. And so therefore, you know, I think some of the screening, some of the architectural standards, things like that that were developed. Again, some of you probably were actually here and serving on the planning commission when this was adopted. So this is my secondhand reading of that, I suppose. But it seems more like the harmony aspect is speaking to the fact that we don't want to drop a strip mall right on the other side of these residences' backyards. To me, it seems pretty clear that there were parcels that were going to be turned over, redeveloped infill to become more of a commercial corridor rather than actually having homes permanently placed right on Perry Highway. You know, certainly the ones that are there, if there's someone living there, terrific. However, it was more designed to redevelop those parcels as they became more attractive rather than to have single family homes popping up along Howard Hanna. That's the way that I read that.
Yeah, the idea there was to have a pleasant livable area rather than just commercial. And that's what that corridor was originally planned as, to avoid a heavy commercial appearance. So I was there, Ted was there. I don't know, Rob, you were there when this was adopted, weren't you?
No, I wouldn't have been here, Jim. That was pre-me. I mean, one idea I have, and it's, again, somebody might have to mess around on their CAD drawings, is to try and soften the blow of all the, I mean, we have almost half of your parking right in the front of the building. It looks to me like if you slid the building up, you could possibly push potentially half of that towards the back and have a much smaller front parking lot area, drop off, pick up, maybe a, so you can still have something for people to get in to the front closely. And then maybe you can shift the building up, then put another bay up, double load the back side of the double load the back driveway. So you would pick the parking up back there. So the whole building would shift north, and then you'd have, 10 spots maybe in the front, 4 handicap and 6, other ones. And then where you show that trees and the other stuff along the back driveway there between the building and that rear parking lot, you would push, that other bay of parking back there.
The one thing I want to make sure we point out is that kind of northwest corner is a significant slope that drops off. That vegetation, we basically have 2 retaining walls to take up grade now. We're preserving all that vegetation and trying not to touch those slopes at all. So although it looks like there's land available up there, there really isn't.
No, these parking spots would go directly to I'm going to call it the south, or no, what's the north, south?
West.
The west.
Right on the west side of the building. So basically backing up to the building where you have those 3 trees there. I don't know what's behind that. I can't really interpret that, but where you have those 3 trees.
It's an outdoor area.
Yeah, that would become a parking lot. That would become parking. So that driveway would get double loaded where it's single loaded now. You would double load that back driveway and take the spots that you can take out of the front and put them back there. So they'd be right adjacent to the building. So it's still easy for people to get in. But you then have a much smaller parking lot in the front yard.
Yeah, I think part of the problem there goes back to our accessibility discussion. The grade does fall as you go back behind this building, so that we can make this connection, which we had to have work. And like someone already mentioned, it is already steep. So we'd have to figure out, there's challenges from a topography standpoint, certainly with anything we do with the layout here, because the site as it is today is higher than its neighboring properties, significantly higher.
I would be, and I don't know, RJ, what it would take, but, and if that helps solve the problem, if we ditch the driveway to Howard Hanna and that helps solve this other issue, I think that's a win-win personally, but I don't know if that's a variance or what that requires, but we do
It would be a variance, yes.
we do modifications all the time. But that to me shouldn't be the driver. That connecting driveway is, as I said earlier, kind of a waste. But
yeah, the modifications would be anything that's in the SALDO, stormwater code, or grading. Anything that's in the straight zoning ordinance with district setback standards like that, that would be a variance, which is what this one falls under.
Because we give modifications for sidewalks.
Yeah, the sidewalks are in the design standards. Those are not in which is in the SALDO section of the zoning and subdivision.
Okay.
Is there any problem with lowering this site? I mean, that would solve a lot of problems, I would think. You're not using the north and northwest portions of this anyway. If you lowered the site by 3 or 4 feet, you might be able to pick up some more usable property and take care of some of these grading problems.
I think
While we're talking about how high are these retaining walls? Because I couldn't pick it out on the drawings. It didn't have a top and a bottom mark or elevation that I could pick up easy. Does anybody know that?
The retaining walls, obviously they vary in height, but they max out at 5 feet. They're tiered. We have 2 walls here on this back side. I think the highest point in the walls is right along here, along this straight stretch, and it maxes out at 5 and 5.
We got a 10-foot high retaining wall, basically, or offset. I understand you've stepped them so you don't have a 10-foot straight up to get away from the maximum. I think we have a maximum of, is it 5 feet, RJ, or 6?
For the retaining walls, I believe it's 6.
Okay.
Next.
I'm just
I think there's
offering.
some sort of, maybe you have to put a chain link fence at the top at 5 feet.
Yeah, anything over 5 feet requires a fence, I believe.
What's the offset amount between the 2 retaining walls?
I believe it's 10
Horizontally?
feet. I would have to check that for you,
Hey,
but I believe
Kaylee-
it's twice the height of the wall.
Kaylee, can you just real quickly go to the back elevation of the building? Because we've got some other elevation that we're absorbing with the building. See it right there? So it's those retaining walls, plus we're absorbing some elevation with the building. So putting the parking in the back, because a lot of these patients are in wheelchairs, or some of them have had diabetic situations where they don't have the good mobility, we would have an additional contour issue to mitigate that's actually with the building in addition to the retaining walls, I think. Isn't that right, Kaylee?
Right, that's correct.
Okay, so we're looking at maybe 15 feet or 20 feet, and carving off the top of that hill. I think at the northeast corner, and I'm just going from my memory, there's only about 6 or 8 feet there. So we would actually have a depression up in that northeast corner, and we're probably into rock, I would guess.
Yeah, and I do think we are actually taking some of the grade down. But when you are talking about a site that, well, obviously we don't have the full capacity of the site because of the topography there. But we're also looking to try to keep all the dirt on site and not haul a ton of dirt off either. So we don't have a ton of wiggle room as far as where we could place, if we would drop an additional 3 or 4 feet now, we're going to generate a ton of additional dirt that we don't have any place to put it on this.
What about up in the northwest corner?
It's too steep, and it continues off beyond our site. So there's no way to chase grade back up on that side, which is really why we didn't touch that corner at all. Haley, go to the existing conditions plan so you can see the black and white survey. Can you zoom in a little bit on that northwest corner? That's good. So you can see that slope is significant. And it runs from 1220 down to 1182 at the corner. So it's steep and it's a lot. So there's really no way to do anything with grade over there on that side. Which is really right where the retaining walls cut that corner to avoid that.
What's your building pad elevation?
I believe it's, let me check here. $1234.
So you're 14 feet above the 1220 number?
Go
Yeah,
back to your,
that's why we have the 2 retaining walls.
Or that's the
back,
retaining
yeah,
wall?
go back to that other site, the existing conditions plan. There we go. 12:34. Are you filling on the southwest corner? Is that what you're doing?
This corner back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Let's see if I can pull up a grading plan. Yeah, so starting right around here, this is fill.
Uh-huh.
And this
Is
the
that
retaining
black,
wall.
heavy black line? Is that a retaining wall?
That's the retaining wall, yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I think your approach on this is not compatible with the properties to the south. I'd like to see you take another look at it, but I know that's expensive, but it just seems to me that, number one, it's going to look a little odd. You're going to have these 4 buildings that are out at about 35, 40 feet from the road, and then you're going to be back in 100 and some feet.
Ted, would it be more helpful if that building, or would that be more satisfactory if that building was rotated 90 degrees?
Well,
And-
that's what I suggested originally, a
Okay.
90-degree rotation, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't remember you saying that. I thought you were talking about pushing the whole building forward. As opposed.
That was me. That was me,
Oh,
Kim.
Okay.
I was suggesting pushing the building up and putting parking in the back,
Mhm.
minimize the front. And
Would it be,
still be some parking in the front.
would it be more palatable to just have it more on the side? If you turn the building, like you said, 90 degrees, push the front of it up more toward the front?
I think we're all kind of thinking that there's too much in the quote unquote front yard right now. So anything they can do to move it away from that is probably the right thing to do.
If they could rotate the building, move it out to about 35 to 40 feet from the road, grass that area like the other projects down the road have, and develop their parking on the northern part of the site, I think they'd be better off themselves. They'd be able to, right now you have to go into this building from 2 sides. You could have a single entrance.
Really, you have an entrance, and then you have back of house. So that back is operationally, they have their trucks that are delivering supplies and materials that access the back, and then the patient experience is all out in the front. So that there is a true front and back to this building. That it's not uniform. It's not an office building that's just an office building all the way around. So there are some functional characteristics and functionalities of how this facility will operate that aren't necessarily exactly the same as AutoZone and the Howard Hanna.
Yeah, well, if you look at Howard Hanna's building, they don't have that thing. They have that sitting at an angle to fit the topography of that land. And that is something you might want to be considering if you redirect the direction of that building and just rotate it, not a full 90 degrees, but just rotate it some clockwise. And you can open up that southern end and move the whole building a little bit to the north. Bring your entrance a little bit closer to the highway, but you'd have all that, then you'd have that whole front area that you could fix up and do a nice job with.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, we can go back and take a look at trying to reduce some of the parking out in the front. I just don't see how we can operationally make this building function and eliminate all of the parking out in the front.
The function of this building is basically it's a piece of medical equipment. The building is a piece of medical equipment. And the patients come in under that canopy in the front, and we've got a certain flow. They got to weigh them in so that they can put them on the kidney machines. But in the back, in that back niche where the corner is, there's actually what we call a water processing room. And what it does is it processes 3 different kinds of liquids that go through the kidney machine to make the kidney do what it needs to do for these patients. And they occasionally get truck delivery probably once or twice a week, maybe more often than that. Patty can probably address that better than me, but that truck coming to the facility, the building itself won't function. So when we
I disagree with
when
you.
we
That
rotate-
building, you can just slide that building a little to the north and then slide the south end a little bit to the west. That is not going to disturb your function at all.
a little bit to the north and a little bit to
We don't have any floor plans either, guys. So you're telling us we can't.
So I don't think we're voting on this tonight. I think this is our first look at it. RJ, is that right? Where are we?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, at this point, I think the point's kind of been made. So if the developer had any other pertinent slides they wanted to go through before we wrap up the presentation, maybe now would be the time.
Sure. I don't know how much of this we can really get into now, but just to touch on these 3 modifications, I think we left off with this one, talking about our setback from the building. The other ordinance states maximum interior side slope shall not exceed 4 to 1 vertical. Our intent here was to maximize the bottom of this facility. It's not a deep facility. It's relatively shallow, but we're trying to maximize our bottom footprint to encourage water quality measures. So that was the intent with this. And we can get more into more detail with this if need be. The overall goal of our stormwater design was to keep stormwater away from the neighboring residential properties to the rear. So we tried to shift as much as we could to the front of the property in an effort to keep stormwater minimized on the rear of the property. So that is why these stormwater facilities ended up where they did, and that's why they were designed the way that they were. Again, connected to the stormwater design, we don't want to impact this steep slope. In fact, that works against us from the way DEP views it. They don't want you touching steep slopes, and they certainly encourage you to keep dense vegetation, which exists in this corner as well. So that really limits our footprint as to where we can place stormwater facilities and how we can size them. So that is the reasoning behind those modification requests. And then the last one refers to the back of the property. The code technically requires a 6-foot fence abutting any residential properties. However, because of the topography, which we've already discussed, being a 30-foot basic difference between our site and the residential sites, as well as our plantings, which comply with the code, and the existing dense vegetation, all of those things would serve in place of a fence. They do everything that a fence would do and more. So that is our justification for that request as well.
Are you providing a fence at the top of the retaining walls or not?
We're providing a fence anywhere the retaining wall is taller than 5 feet, which is only in this corner here in this loading area. This wall goes up to 6 feet, which is the maximum allowed within the code. And we do have a fence proposed in this corner.
And you're proposing a chain link fence, as I understand it?
Chain link with slats, I believe, is what we are proposing. Privacy slats. So that pretty much sums up my scheduled presentation, or obviously we can, I don't want to take up too much more of your guys' time, but we are happy to answer any other questions or concerns.
Yeah, I would just like to say, we're not trying to give you a hard time here, but we are responsible to maintain what we think McCandless Township should look like. And so that's our motive. And we want to help you do that.
Let me ask this question, just
I-
speaking to the intent of the ordinance, because we do have this kind of odd topography and our site is so lifted compared to the sites next to it, do we risk creating kind of an imposing structure by putting it very close to the road? I mean, would that be a concern? You know, it would still stick out because of the slopes that we're dealing with here. So it's a question to the group.
It's only a single story building, right?
Correct.
What is the area of it?
Just,
The area of your building?
it's 9,
Footprint.
oh, the footprint, what is it? I think it's
9,900
Oh,
square feet.
okay.
I had one other comment, and it's on your, again, I didn't have floor plans, I didn't have elevation, so I don't know if I missed that packet. RJ, I'll have to work with you on making sure I get that next time, but the parking, the lighting in the back on C703, poles that are on the building side of that driveway, trying to illuminate back to that parking that goes along the rear of the site. I would be concerned that because you are setting, at least according to my quick math, I thought it was 12 feet above the neighbors right there behind you, that they would see those poles basically as big light orbs. If it would be better to put those lights on the north, south, east, west, on the back side of the parking lot, so they were shining in towards the building in lieu of shining away from the building, so that you could have some rear cutoff, shades on those, so that somebody looking from the residence below would be less. I think they might be less likely to see them. I know that puts them closer to the property line, but it flips the light source so it's pointing away from them in lieu of pointing towards them. Just a two-cent comment on the lighting plan.
It's the building there too.
We
Are
can
you
take a look at that, and we can look and see at 12 feet. I don't know. You still may not even be able to actually see the fixtures given the topography and the walls, but we'll take a look. If they would be visible, we can flip them and put a house side shield on that side.
Yeah, I mean, the poles are 20 some feet. Look, they were 24 feet-ish, if I remember what your detail showed. So 12 plus 24, you're at 36 feet now up. And again, that was just really quick looking at elevation. So
We'll take a look at it.
it would be practical to flip them so you're not pointing, even though I know they're LED, they're very directional. You'll still see that light source when you look up there. So that's the only thing, the comment I had besides some of my others that we previously made. So
One last note, are you providing a right-of-way for a connection to the north property in the future? If somebody develops the northern property, that they could do the same thing you did with the southern property.
Yeah, I can't remember where we landed on that, RJ, in our discussion. There's an existing retaining wall on that property right now. We'd have to talk about that. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
let me take a look real quick at the street view here. I mean, I think that to be consistent with Howard Hanna, you would want to at least provide the right of way.
Yeah,
in a
that's all
place.
I'm looking for.
Yeah, that wouldn't be tragic, to put a connection in if those properties were to be redeveloped. But not expecting an asphalt stub or anything like that at this time.
No.
I don't know how you can connect to the north because you're going to have a cliff.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty close to the road if you do, but again, that's what the RC district code.
Yeah.
RJ, for the one to the south, does that impact whatever we approve for Howard Hanna's parking capacity? Is that factored in? They're going to lose?
Well, we would have to take a look, I suppose. I mean, it wasn't a red flag in the pre-app meetings to us. It looks like they'd probably lose 3 spots.
4, but okay. But I mean, I don't know what their required parking capacity is versus what they have versus what was approved. I
Yeah, we can double check.
Okay.
In experience, I mean, they don't seem concerned about losing the parking space. The main concern that was raised, at least that's a public interest, by someone at Howard Hanna, was what happens to the runoff on the driveway. I'm assuming that it would end up on their property if it's landing on the ramp because of
Yep.
gravity.
Yep.
But again, that anything that's some sort of maintenance agreement or plowing, whatnot, that's between the two private property owners. Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, well, there you go.
So are we going to table this then for this month?
Yeah, we were not asking for a vote today.
Okay. So I guess what we would do is table this till next month, and you'll come back with whatever you come back with.
I'll move to table it till next meeting.
Is there a second?
We need to vote on it, Ted.
What?
This was just the discussion. This wasn't.
Presentation.
Oh, this wasn't a submittal?
Well, this kicks off the timeline since we've accepted the application, because all the pieces that are required for a
So we
complete
don't need
application.
to table this?
Now, I would say that, I mean, if you really want to vote on it, you can. It won't hurt anything, but there's unless you're all asking for a vote on a table to the developer, I don't think it's explicitly necessary.
All right. Okay, well, we can just let it, I assume then that they will come back next month or the month after?
That's the plan.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You'll have to put up the
Agenda. Yeah.
agenda again.
Okay, let me just get everybody shuffled through here so that we're back to just the Planning Commission. Okay. And here we go.
Okay. So the next item is the oil and gas amendment, discussion
Our
of final
favorite.
comments.
Yep. So, that kind of ended abruptly. Let me call our town attorneys on here, and I'll just give you a little bit of background while they're logging in. So, just to sort of recap where we've been, what we've done over the last couple of the months for the benefit of the group. About a month ago, we didn't have any action items on the agenda for September, so that meeting was canceled. However, in the meantime, the Planning Commission members had the opportunity, if they had any further written comments, to submit for basically compiling by topic, regulation, standard, to send to the town attorney for sort of a yes, no, is this legal? Can we regulate this? Overall general comment for them to review with us at this meeting. At this point, we're looking at essentially going down the list. I've got a couple notes that should hopefully keep us moving on each item. But the goal here is to get a clearly defined list of recommendations to town council, so that way everyone can see what specifically the Planning Commission recommended versus making edits to a 34-page document that it's not really clear what came from who and why. And again, just sort of for efficiency's sake, the town council can take sort of what recommendations, if not all, they want to incorporate and go from there. We have got Mr. Rob on the call. I believe we're going to have Ms. Janosko possibly at some point. Gavin, is she hopping on too?
I believe she is, yeah.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything left after that first hour and 15? I hope so. We got
Yeah, sorry, I suddenly realized it was like we ended, we're moving right along. So,
hey, it's only 35 pages. Should be a piece of cake.
right. Oh, 30. See, I just said 34. So I'm short.
Yeah.
Katie's, her audio is looping in now. And I just gave everyone a recap while we were getting you two situated, essentially what we did with compiling the comments, and sort of you all taking a pass, given the up or down for can we regulate, can we not, and any additional comments, and we're gonna just go down the list, basically.
Yeah, sounds good. Appreciate everybody's input. There were some really good comments, and RJ did a great job of sort of distilling that down to the legal aspect of it too, so we could sort of focus on what we needed to focus on. So thanks for everybody's efforts.
All right, I think we've got her here. And before I launch into the list, I just want to note for any of the members of the public that are tuned in, I know some people the last time that we discussed this had some public comment. There is a public comment section on the agenda at the end. Of course, for security reasons, we keep folks muted if they're not participating, but if you want to make a public comment, please open the chat function in your Zoom app, Zoom program, whatever. Type in there your name that you want to comment, address, and I will make sure to queue you up if we have public comment by the end of the meeting. All right, Mr. Chairman, did you want to make any comments or ask any questions, anything before we launch here?
No, I'm going to leave that up to you.
All right. Grab my sheet here. So I've kind of broken this into, there were some comments that we got on definitions. There were comments that we got on the express criteria section, essentially the performance standards, and then a few comments that we got on the contents of the application section. This is something that I believe came out of the last time as a group we were reviewing this. It was sort of similar to the 5G, whether or not we wanted to codify very specific recommendations or requirements for what had to be submitted with a development application, conditional use for this. Again, whether or not we want to actually go so far as to codify them in the ordinance, or if we just want to, sort of approve an appendix of this is what we need to have for an administrative application. Similar to land development, we can talk about that when we get there. But that was added to the pending ordinance doctrine draft, which is what council did to sort of cover us with what we had last time we saw it. In the meantime, while we sort of took a step and reassessed, thought about, what larger comments everyone would have in the review process. So those are the first three more specific sections. And then there's just a couple general overarching comments from the group. Now, you all should have been emailed out copies of what I received from everyone, just so in case you were curious, we're all on the same page of what everyone said. But does anyone have any questions about the process? I'm sort of looking for a yes, no, if we can get it, or discussion on each of the points if we have any concerns as to whether or not to include. Does that make sense? All right. So for the definition section, we got, actually, Dan, you had some really great comments throughout. I understand you got some particular knowledge of the industry, so that was helpful, especially for the technical terms. But more specifically, the first one we had up was the definition for drilling. Dan, you mentioned whether that would address scenarios other than opening a new well if it was re-drilling. Town attorney said, yeah, that sounds good. We can amend the definition to cover those things. So we've got that. There was, I think both Kim and Dan called out the definitions of drilling site or pad or well pad. If we wanted to call that well pad, there was maybe some overlap between all those definitions. So town attorney took a look. They said it would make sense to remove the term drilling site and the term pad and combine sort of that overall into a well pad definition as suggested. Is that correct? Okay, thank you, Katie.
Well, before you get off of that, one of the reasons for the reason that we question that, or I question it, is because there were some distance requirements from the pad, so to speak. The pad is going to change over time. It'll get grown in with grass. You won't know where the limits are. And that's why I think I suggested that some of those distance limits are actually measured from the well head, or what they call the
Yes.
Christmas tree.
Yeah,
Because
that was one of the comments that I highlighted in
Okay.
blue as good technical knowledge. So, yeah, we do later in, I think it's either, I believe it's the express criteria. Some of the comments got a little more into that, and I believe I won't go too much more in depth in the definition section, but I believe that there is an actual term, vertical well bore, in the Oil and Gas Act that our team at Tucker suggested that might be the best term to adhere to a specific setback to, since that's actually something that's in the Oil and Gas Act. So same kind of idea. So that the suggestion there is to make well pad a defined term, remove drilling site and pad, and sort of tighten that up. Next definition, we had fracking. Dan pointed out we should add oil well there in addition to gas well, and to change one of the sentences to improve hydrocarbon recovery. Again, that's sort of more all-encompassing. I thought that was some good technical feedback. We're okay with that if the group's good there. Production facility, that was just a term that seemed a little unclear. What exact function was it serving? If the group would like to take it out, solicitors say that's okay. And again, finally, well site, that was going to be clarified that the actual well site is the area that is beyond the well pad. This is in, again, relation to your comment, Dan, I think. And that this term would include other improvements to the property. For example, the improved portion of the property used in connection with drilling or development activities might be some suggested language from the town attorneys. So I know I kind of we ran through all those terms. Is there anything sticking out to anyone that they have concerns with?
What was the differentiation between well pad and well site again?
Yeah, hang on, let me grab that. Unless Gavin and Katie, do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the way we're measuring the well pad is the actual kind of graded, cleared area on which the drilling operation occurs. And then the well site would go beyond that to other improvements that might be located on the property, such as, whether it's a guardhouse or fencing or whatever. I think that's how what we were thinking to determine well site is that larger, more comprehensive definition. What do you think about that, Brendan?
I generically use the terms interchangeably. So to me, there's some concern, for example, with an access road that goes from the public right-of-way up to the well pad. Would that be considered part of the well site, or would that be still considered, an access road per se?
Yeah. I wouldn't view the access road. That would be the one thing that would extend all the way to the property line. So at that point, you might as well just be defining the entire property as the well site. So I was thinking more sort of the improved area, but not including the access road is what I was envisioning.
I mean, what another thought could possibly be, and I mean, that makes sense, would just be to, if the definition of a well pad matched the DEP approved limit of disturbance for the development and the pad, I don't have a problem with the pad definition. That makes sense. But I guess the well site would encompass graded areas, other things like that, which aren't necessarily on the cleared pad. I mean, I think that there is a differentiation. I don't think that there's a problem, just so long as they're clearly defined of what the difference between the two is, because I think that there is a tendency to use them synonymously when just making sure that they're referencing two separate things.
Yeah,
That would
no,
be a good idea.
we agree with that. That needs to be clarified.
Well, let's say, Brendan, that's a good idea to use the limits of disturbance as part of the definition of the site, because that's clearly definable. It's clearly RJ or anybody can go out and say, okay, this is where the limits of disturbance that were approved by the DEP for your NPDES or whatever. It's not like, oh, well, we did this, but we didn't do that. You know what I mean? That would be a pretty clear way to define that. And then, whether you want to leave the exception then for the access road is not that, even though that would be part of the NPDS, you could probably clearly delineate that access road clearing part.
Does our well site, I can't recall, require a fence? Because the site is clearly bigger than the pad, at least in my experience. It would include things like any tankage or separators or other pieces of equipment. And usually that is fenced for security, but they typically don't fence the pad itself, which is a much smaller dimension. So maybe we can link it to the fencing. If our ordinance requires fencing.
They could have a parking area outside the fence. You know, which you probably would. You wouldn't necessarily fence in where you're going to park all your trucks, but it would still be part of the well site or whatever, not the well pad, but just whatever.
Yeah,
I think
they are distinct.
all your equipment has to be within the well site, but
Yes.
the well pad is where they're actually drilling the area.
That's correct.
So the well site would include everything, including parking,
Right.
and the road, the access road would come up to the well site. Once it's in the well site, that's up to the well driller.
Yep, those are all good points, and I think we can do that, make that clarification and address those comments.
Okay.
All right, that's all I got for definitions. So I've made a couple notes about the limited disturbance and making sure that it remains clear, the delineation between well pad and well site. But other than that, are we good to say green light to put this in the official document?
Yeah.
All right.
Should we have a vote on that, or how do we do it?
I would say at this point, just a general consensus, but before, I'll sort of do a recap at the end of what did or did not make it into sort of the official list as we go. And then you all would vote on that as being the official recommendation. Does that make sense?
That's fine.
All right. Okay, so we're on to express criteria. So the first comment, we got sort of a general overarching, the statement of purpose, which is section A, that there was some questions about whether section A was overlapping a little bit with section C, which is where the express criteria start. There are some comments about general setbacks in there that maybe they could be called out a little more clearly for somebody reading the ordinance for regulations. So the town attorney's suggestion was that they could revise the statement of purpose, which is section A, to be the statement of recognition and best interest, streamline the zoning references, and revise the paragraph at the beginning of express criteria to subsections for readability purposes. Would you like to elaborate on that, Katie or Gavin?
Go ahead, Katie.
I can elaborate on that. I have the draft in front of me. Yes, that subsection that was originally called the statement of purpose, there's some language in there stating that just generally it's in the town's best interest to have information concerning oil and gas exploration, development, and production taking place within the town, and to ensure certain security and safety measures related to oil and gas well drilling are in place. And we also recognize in there the Pennsylvania Environmental Rights Amendment. That's that Article 1, Section 27, that guarantees all Pennsylvanians the right to clean air and pure water. We had also written in the statement of purpose the fact that we were proposing to have the oil and gas development as a use authorized as a conditional use in the certain specific zoning districts. And so just to remove that mention of the conditional use and make it the section a little bit more generic with respect to the ERA and just our purpose of giving the town all the information that it seeks regarding any potential oil and gas drilling, just so that the conditional use isn't repeated in two sections. And just on the off chance that this would get amended down the road, we would not need to amend both sections with respect to what zoning districts the use is permitted in as a conditional use.
Which I will say, for my sanity, is very important when we're
Right,
reading through
so-
ordinances, making sure we've covered all of the double references.
I just retitled it a statement of recognition and best interest instead of a statement of purpose, because we're saying the town recognizes the ERA and it's in the town's best interest to have the information regarding oil and gas exploration. And then we can certainly break that more narrative introductory paragraph to the express criteria into a more bulleted list, you know, with a classification, 1,000 feet from a protected structure, like an A, B, and C format. I think RJ mentioned that she'd prefer that, make it a little bit more clear as opposed to the narrative paragraphs.
Yes, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Makes it easier for me to cite on the off chance that we do have one of these developments coming through. Also, I want to note, since we talked a bit about the environmental rights amendment point here, this was a general comment. I believe I received this from Kim about making sure that we incorporate some reference to the environmental rights amendment. You know, like Katie said originally, that was just in one of the recitals. I think that's what you call the whereas clauses.
That's right.
So learning something. So now that's going to be more clearly stated in this paragraph. That's something that we can reference from a code perspective, and also, you know, that moves forward to the permanent part of the code that you actually see in the zoning book instead of just being a part of the ordinance as recorded. So that kind of checks off that general comment as well that we're covering, mentioning the environmental rights amendment for the state of Pennsylvania. So does that kind of address streamlining that for those that were concerned about those sections?
It seems to. It's kind of difficult for me until I see the final product. It's hard to put an imprimatur on anything, but based on what you stated, it seems to make sense.
Okay, so that's a solid recommendation we can carry forward, is make sure that these paragraphs are cleaned up, clarified, we rework them a little bit so that they cover all of the points that Katie has referenced here. All right, I'm checking this one off. I think that this also came out of your same comment, Dan, about adding a notices section, delineating those a little more clearly. Katie and Gavin were in agreement. That was definitely something we could do. I'm also okay with anything that makes it easier for me to reference. So I think that's a good idea. Any issues with the notice section?
No.
Yes and no. That would be a very specific thing to take issue with. All right, so the next section is just a quick comment. We're going to revise the reference on the pending ordinance version, which is a little updated compared to what maybe some of you all had seen. What I've got for a reference is C. All of these are under section C. Number 2, letter O, second number 3. This is regarding operators equipment where it can be placed on the site. Dan called out that the wording seemed to maybe imply that it could block a fire lane if they needed it to. So we're going to clarify and make sure that you cannot do that, and that it's clear. So,
My comment.
Sorry, did you say something?
I said that was my comment too.
Yes.
If that's what it says, actually, it does say that.
Yeah. So we're gonna clean that up so you can't do that. Seems like a bad idea. I believe that the next comment I had may have been from Kim that was regarding notices for dangerous chemicals. You know, the suggestion was that some sort of notice should be sent out to, I believe, anyone within a certain distance of the property for whether they were using dangerous chemicals or not in the process, and if so, information about them. I know this is kind of a little more something that might be covered by the Oil and Gas Act, so I'm going to turn this over to Katie to elaborate on.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we talked about. I do think we could increase the time period for the notices. I think so. I think it might have been Kim's comment that was to push it from 30 days to 90 days. There is a reporting requirement for chemicals that is right in the Act 13, and there are protections regarding some of the proprietary and trade secret chemical information that have been upheld even after the Robinson cases. So, you know, even though some of those protections regarding the disclosure of chemicals and specifically physicians having to sign confidentiality agreements in order to obtain chemical information, that was struck down. However, I do think that if we would, there's certainly some question as to whether we can require disclosure of chemical lists when there's a specific process under the Oil and Gas Act for that disclosure to occur. So, you know, again, that would be something that would be pushing the envelope a bit, and it's difficult to say whether or not that would, you know, that would be upheld or not.
Well, how about disclosures for emergency personnel, knowing if they come in there, what they're going to be exposed to?
Yes, I mean there are disclosure provisions for emergency personnel in the event of an you know, a spill. Those are right in the Oil and Gas Act as to how that works.
Okay, so they're going to be warned and be aware.
Right. Right.
So what does the warning look like to the population then in Act 13?
There is the warning to the population. There's no notice of listing chemicals. You're essentially just putting people on notice that there's a potential drilling operation, but they're not getting the detailed list of fracking.
So you wouldn't say that there are chemicals that are being used in fracking that are, without naming what they are, chemicals such as or may include this and have been associated with these certain health symptoms.
Well, I mean, these chemicals are approved to be used by the state for this particular purpose. So I think
Yeah,
telling,
so was Agent Orange, but that doesn't.
I'm not defending it, right? I mean, I'm not taking sides here. I'm just telling you that, you know, someone at the DEP has said that these are safe chemicals to use for fracking. I'm not saying they are not. But to have the driller say, you know, here's the chemicals we're using and they may make you sick, I think you're gonna get a lot of pushback and potential challenge on that.
I would like to include that there are chemicals that are used during drilling and some kind of language that lets people know that just like all medications that you're exposed to and all chemicals that you're exposed to, every cleaning solution that you use will tell you, you know, some of the side effects that you can have. You need ventilation, or if it gets in your eyes, you need to wash out your eyes or whatever. I think we need something so that that says if you're experiencing nosebleeds or whatever, seek medical, something so that people know, have some idea of some of the side effects that they could be having if they're exposed to some of these chemicals. They need some kind of warning. What can that be?
Well, it's certainly something we could look into. Maybe the town could create some sort of informational packet that would supplement these notices. So we're not asking the drillers to essentially, you know, admit or, you know, what, so we don't even get into that conversation and just say, you know, have a town, again, packet of information, whether it's a link on the website, whether it's a physical mailing, just to kind of provide that general information, Kim, to put them on notice of potential, you know, negative effects. I think we'd have to be careful how we worded it, but I think we could put something together.
Well,
I think that's a good idea, honestly. Jim, what were you going to say?
I was going to say the state's going to be supervising any hazardous material that's going to affect the people that live in that community. They're not. There's got to be some authority that has some control over what can be used on a drill.
There are, but the inspectors are very understaffed. They're not getting to places in timely manners. Look it up, Jim. The sites are grossly under inspected. So
well, I'm sure. Yeah, I am sure that's the case. It's a government job. You know, I'm sorry.
The town is not going to be inspecting sites.
Correct.
Not in our purvey or our
Oh,
jurisdiction.
absolutely not. But if
Right.
our citizens around the site start having symptoms and they're not aware that those symptoms could be associated with something that has to do with the drilling, I think they need to be aware that, oh, I could be having these symptoms and you need to seek medical attention.
Aren't they
immediately.
supposed to report that to the state though? I mean, that's,
I don't know that. I don't
Well,
know.
I think if we want to carry forward any sort of chemical notice requirements, the point that Gavin made about it could be something that the town essentially takes on as a mailing or a notice, that might that covers the concerns that are being expressed here, while also not putting us in a position where we're putting the developer in a situation where they could maybe challenge as to whether this is reasonable. Who's the person that decides whether or not it's dangerous? Certainly, if I was an operator of a site like this, I would say, well, none of it's dangerous. It's fine. And so, who is the person that ultimately decides the level of danger and what that is? That would fall on us. And I think, legally that might be a challenge, as Gavin was saying. So, cut out the middleman. Maybe we internally set, if you're within the protected structure radius or something like that, we're just automatically going to send you this informational packet. How do we feel about that, lawyers? Is that going to get us in trouble?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable compromise.
So
Yeah,
I have this comment on here because it came from Kim's review as the liaison. Does the group want to carry it forward as a recommendation?
I want to ask one other question, Gavin. For first responders, particularly, are we requiring, and again, this is probably OSHA, but I don't know if it's something we want to reinforce, that they have like the MSDS sheets, readily available for first responders to review in case, they need to. For example, in the school district where I used to work, we would have a binder, paper copy, MSD sheets. They'd be in the nurse's office, they'd be in the custodian's office, and they would be, I think, in the main office, so that if we had a spill in a biology lab, first responders could get that information handed quickly, and we could share that with them so they knew what they were dealing with. Is there some coverage of that, either in our ordinance or through somehow through OSHA, or how does that?
I think all businesses have to provide those.
Yeah,
So
they don't have to provide them; they have to have them.
Yeah, even
So
the Saturday hospital, we had the book, everything in there.
Well, I'm not sure everybody's that astute of that, Jim. I mean, I'm guessing there's more people than not who don't do that. But again, this is not a new industry. I'm just wondering if you know how that. Again, because you're going to have guys rolling up in a fire truck because something smells. How do they, what they're dealing with?
I believe there are
We put
stipulations.
that in the ordinance that MSD has to be there.
I believe there are
I'm
stipulations
just
that there's
asking.
an emergency plan that has to be on file with the town's emergency management coordinator, which of course is our fire marshal right now, and a few other agencies that essentially it has to be accessible to us in the public sector. Now,
That cover
we certainly
MSDS
share
sheets?
those.
That
with
MSDS, RJ, is that defined to include MSDS sheets?
let me see if that pops up. I don't recall seeing MSDS.
Oh, no,
in
it's not MSDS now. It's got a new name. It's SS something now. It changed. It was MSDS. It's something else now.
Okay.
New name for it. New acronym.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
Safety
protection
data
on the.
Safety data sheets, they're called now. They're not MSDS. They're safety data sheets.
Is that
And
part of the PPC plan, though, that is going to be required for the site?
That's.
I think so.
I think we could be more explicit. That is the intent, is that it would be part of that PPC plan. I think we could be more explicit about the safety data sheets, and that is in the event of a spill. That is one of the sort of, these folks are generally are allowed to not disclose this information, but in the event of a spill, that is one of the exceptions to that disclosure of this sort of information. So I think spelling out the safety data sheet and that PPC plan, we think our intent was it would be there anyway, but to include it in the ordinance, I don't think there's any harm in that.
And I want to correct myself here because the PPC plan is what I was referring to just there. I said the emergency management coordinator would receive it. That was incorrect. It is actually the police department and fire companies, and also me as the zoning officer. Currently, since our emergency management coordinator is part of one of our fire companies, he would get it either way, but I would make sure to share it when it was received.
Okay, again, I just want to make sure we give those guys and girls right information if they're rolling up on that kind of stuff, so.
So, okay, we want to include a specific call out. Oh boy, where do I want to put here? Okay, I do actually have an item for PPC plan, so that dovetails well. Okay, so add the SDS into the materials provided. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think we decided on safety data sheet was the was Rob's term.
I think you can Google it, but I'm pretty sure MSDS got reclassified too.
Yeah, when I had to get my pull operator certification, they were still calling it MSDS, so that was what I was thinking.
The last couple of years they
Yeah,
reclassified.
us old timers remember MSDS.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so
I have something. It's so long since I've gone over this. Do we have in this ordinance a requirement for retention of all stormwater and surface water on that site? Because you don't want stormwater contaminated, perhaps, running down on neighbors.
I mean, there's no stormwater provisions in this ordinance particularly, but there is a town stormwater ordinance that I think should cover that.
Well, I want to make sure that it does, because you would not believe the stormwater that comes down on me at home.
I know. Yeah, it's not.
In theory, under the more recent Act 167 regulations, you're supposed to be able to control all runoff coming off of your site so that you're not adding any new flow. And again, that all the stormwater coming from your development is controlled. In theory, that's how that's supposed to work. That's how we review them.
I'll bring you down some pictures showing you what happens when it rains on our property.
Yeah.
You're not alone. You're not alone, Jim. You're not alone, unfortunately.
Right. Not the first one I've heard that from.
So that would be part of the site approval, though. I mean, when we approve the site, that's when we would hit all the stormwater, right?
Yes, they would still have to go through all the normal land development review. These are additional conditions.
We'll get them then, Jim.
The contaminated water.
We'll get them then.
Right. Okay. So the notices item again, we talked about the chemicals issue, and maybe the resolution to that would be to the town to take on the responsibility for sending out information. Do we want to carry that forward in general, and is that a good solution if yes?
It sounds like we don't have many options based on what Gavin said. I mean, we can't just make them tell us what they use, right, Gavin, is what I heard, very.
That's right.
Summarized way.
It's proprietary.
Right.
So they don't have to tell us one single thing?
They have to report to the DEP the chemicals that they use.
I mean, the practical issue of what happens is that the companies that use these generally don't know what goes into it because they're manufactured by companies who keep the information proprietary. So the companies actually involved in completing the wells know what it is called and generally know what's in there, but they don't know exactly what it is, and may themselves have to go to the manufacturer to try to get the information about what it actually is. So by the time it gets to the town or DEP, it's about 4 layers beyond what it actually is.
Yeah.
You've placed all our minds at ease, Brendan. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good context. I appreciate that.
I do.
No, that's good. That's good to know.
We talked about it as we discussed it. Is some drilling sites they will recycle that fluid. They'll
Right.
clean it up and recycle it. That means they got to keep it and hold it on site. What provisions for that?
I think we've said we're not doing that. I think that's in this ordinance that says that you're not allowed to, that has to go off site, right, Gavin?
That's my recollection. I know there's no open pits
The
permitted.
no open pits for sure.
Yeah, we did get that comment, which is later on down the list. But yeah, I mean, already there was no open pits, but we're deleting any reference to them
No,
whatsoever.
that wouldn't be open pit. I mean, I agree with that, but this would be contained in tanks. And
Yeah,
then-
didn't we approve a closed loop system?
Yeah,
I don't think. I don't remember that.
Well, we used to have it. Your comment says that it was addressed.
Yeah,
I
you
thought-
know what? I don't think it's in, I think that there is a definition of it in here, but it's not something that's included as part of the actual operations.
Well, I know that there have been comments made about best management practices and what in the world that is, and it's hard to define. Many operators would think that a best management practice would be to reuse those fluids. It's the most economical. It's the most environmentally benign, et cetera, et cetera. And that can only be done in a closed loop system if we're not allowing open pits.
Yes, so RJ, there's a provision on disposal plan, and I'm not sure if I have the right, if our pages match up. It's on page 15 on my version that I'm looking at, so it'd be thereabouts on yours. It talks about the applicant shall identify the means and availability of the site for disposal of cuttings, fracturing fluids, oil, toxic materials, hazardous materials, and other waste products. Improvements for the purpose of storing and or treating fracking and related fluids is prohibited. All such fluids shall be hauled or removed from the town for treatment and disposal at an alternate location.
That's what I was remembering.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and that's good, except that now you've got, if they're not able to treat and recycle, now you've got the trucks running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all the time. That's why that's not a bad idea if it's done right.
I don't know that they would be recycling on the pad.
Say that again, Brendan.
So I don't know that they would be recycling on the pad. In at least my conception of the closed loop system, instead of the waste going into a cuttings pit, they go into tanks. And they're stored in the tanks for some period, which probably has to be defined. You know, some accumulation versus long-term storage, and then gets trucked out to the facilities that actually process them.
Well, I think they process it right on site.
No, they do not. They do not.
They don't.
So let's, these are all good comments, but I want to try and keep us going down the list here because I'm sure we could meander around the ordinance. But we've got about 2 pages here that we got to run through.
RJ, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like this does sort of flag this closed loop system. The only time it's used is in the definitions. Might have been carryover from a prior version. So I think we could probably just nix that definition since it's not used in the rest of the ordinance.
Sounds good to me. I'll add that as a note to definitions.
Yeah, we saved 3 lines. We're probably down to 34 pages now. You're probably
Yeah, and Dan, I think I marked that as addressed because when I went looking for the original section reference that you had a comment on, it had been deleted. So like Gavin said, that probably just didn't make its way out of the ordinance and corresponding definition section. So, all right, I've got delete closed loop definition marked down here. For the group's considerations, this whole notices issue. What do we want to do? Include it, not include it? How we going?
What notice are you talking about?
This is the whole discussion about the town sending out the information packets, you know, whatever we settle on. Is the recommendation of the planning commission that the town takes on notices for chemicals that may be of concern.
Wouldn't that include like well interruption or funny tasting water and all of those things? Wouldn't it be like everything, not just the chemicals, but everything associated with it?
The reason that I've been using the word chemicals is just based on my notes of the phone conversation we had where dangerous chemicals was something specifically that was mentioned. But I think at this stage, overall, we're kind of looking from the planning commission for whether or not they are prepared to, at this point, include in their recommendations that the town should develop some sort of informational packet with hazard notices.
Located at town hall rather than sending it out to everybody, because who are you going to send it to? The immediate adjacent people, or you just say that this information is available to everybody?
Yeah, I would definitely say make it available in general, but more specifically, anyone that was within the protected structure radius, since there are certain notices and other stipulations as it's currently written. I think we're going to talk about that a little more later. But
Okay.
yeah, if we keep that structure, I'd probably say auto mail to anyone within that distance. And Kim, I'm going to bring back my notes from our conversation for when we hit the council stage as well, just so you know.
I mean, it sounds like a good idea for the town to do it, but I don't want it to be creating some onerous, if it's simply send it to so many people, like you said, RJ, just in some, maybe it's 50 people or whatever. It's not, 3/4 of the town protected. I don't remember how far that goes, but I mean, it doesn't sound like a bad idea to send a postcard to somebody, but again, I'm speaking without understanding what that means in reality. So
I don't think you can send out all the information. That's because it'll get thrown in the round file. Somebody that gets it, they aren't going to read it unless there's something that happens. And then they're going to want to know, well, then they need to be able to go to a place where they can obtain that. I mean, how many things you get in the mail and say, I don't need that now. But later on, I say, whoa, wait a minute.
But even if the mailing just said, hey, there's a well pad within so many feet, miles, whatever that number is, and if you have an issue with it, contact the DEP at this phone number website.
I think that may be something they're required to send out Gavin's nodding. So that sort of notification would come from the drillers.
Well, then maybe that's what you need then, if they're doing that already.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from the group is we're not ready to commit to this in a recommendation. However, I will put a little star by it because it's a Kim comment. So we're coming back. And maybe this is something that's a little more appropriate for town council to
I'm going to say, let the council decide.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to say for this item, not on this list, but return to discussion, town council. That note's just for me. You all don't have to do that. Okay, next one, hydrological study section. There were a couple comments, one I got from Dan, one from Kim. Dan's comment was it just states something about if there's any alteration to groundwater, that I think it's like they can't proceed or they have to.
The application is denied, any alteration to groundwater.
So the suggestion was, should we actually specify like a negative alteration to groundwater? I think the suggestion from Gavin and Katie was negative impact to be used as the language there. The second comment that I had for this section from Kim was that she would like to add existing wells and streams to the consideration for what's evaluated. Those were both fine on the town attorney's end. So how do we all feel?
Well, I think just stating any alteration to groundwater results in an application denial is too vague. I think you have to state something negative has to occur. Once you say that, then I'm okay with it.
Okay, so I think negative impact is a good way to capture that there. All right. Any objections to this one?
I'm sorry, how are you going to define negative impact?
Well, you got a point, Jim, because one, that means you're going to have had some sort of data, baseline data, to know what the quality of your water was.
Right.
And then you've got to compare that to the after effect. And is it negative? Has the quality of your water degraded? You get into some.
Wells, if they have wells, but they don't have wells around. Well, maybe they do.
So this whole section here is based off of a hydrological study would have to be done if it was not already included with the DEP permits. And so this is looking at the groundwater table, what the proposed use would do to the quote unquote hydrology of the site, surface and groundwater, quantity and quality. So essentially what we'd be saying here is if there's a negative impact to the quantity and quality of the water table, you know, the streams, the wells in this area.
Groundwater would be well water. It's not surface
Yes.
water. This well water.
Yeah.
That's got to be protected.
Yeah. Does that cover all the questions for this section? All right. Giving it a green check mark unless any object. Okay, next one, pre and post development testing. Kim requested adding testing also during drilling. Town attorney said this is okay if we want to add that. Personally, I don't necessarily know how that would work. Maybe the oil and gas folks here can chime in.
What testing is this?
This is, I believe it's pre and post soil quality testing.
I mean, I think the general idea is what you do a pre-test to determine a baseline, and then you do a test after the project's done to determine if there was any deterioration in the soil. And I think Kim is asking, hey, is there a way we can sort of check in mid process here to make sure, try to get out ahead of any kind of deterioration?
At what point, I mean, that's how how do you define what point of the process do you want to do that?
I think maybe my suggestion would be maybe we just leave it at the discretion of the town, and that could be in response to a complaint, for example, or some sort of evidence that there's, you know, some sort of problem.
So it'd be if required, then it wouldn't necessarily be a you must.
Right.
That makes sense.
I'd like it to be, I'd like it to be, I disagree. I'd like it to be every year. I don't want to have somebody drilling for 20 years and then we find out that we've got a brownfield now. I'd like to know that we're starting to get some soil contamination early, and then we can start taking care of it right then, not 20 years after they've been doing it. That's my thought process with that.
Yeah.
Are we specifically talking about soil contamination here or something else?
Soil.
Soil.
Yes.
The way it's,
Would the driller be responsible for doing that?
Yes.
yeah. And the way it's worded, it's just soil condition. So, you know, that could be anything from, you know, have the soils change or their compaction issues beyond, you know, is there contamination? And then the question becomes, how are these sampling locations selected? Who has the ability to select or dictate that? And is that something that the town necessarily wants to take on? And do we require that same kind of thing with other intensive type facilities? Because I think that's the point of pushback where an operator says, well, where else does the town require this type of investigatory activity?
Well, do we require it for a gasoline station, for example, to make sure their tanks aren't leaking or have leaked over time?
I don't think we do.
No, there is definitely not a use section this long for gas stations.
They have to do some of their own testing though, if I remember. I don't remember the DEP regs on gas pumps anymore. The other thing, Brendan, would be the same deal. How many? Is it 1? Is it 5? Is it 50? How many are we, is it some quantity per square, per acre, or how do you define the
I think we
numbers?
said that, I think we said that we would find a specialist that would do the initial testing. So whoever were the people who did the initial testing and the final testing would be the gurus who knew all of that. That's not for us to decide. What is the language in here that says that we will get somebody who knows how to do this, and they will come in and they will do the testing. That's their job. We're not trying to be all these things. We're just saying that we're going to get the people who know how to do this to do it.
Yeah, the operator would be responsible for testing within 300 feet of each well site the soil conditions, and results would be submitted to both us and the DEP within 10 days of the operator receiving them. They also have to pay for all of it. And it says testing shall be done by an independent state certified testing lab agreed upon by the town. So essentially we have to sign.
You. Thank you. I couldn't find it.
My concern is whether that gets too far into the DEP's purview.
Yeah.
Not to make a comment about the effectiveness of DEP, but if there is a spill on site, I believe the operator is obligated to alert the DEP, and then the DEP goes out and identifies what kind of remediation has to be done. So my concern would be whether if we have an enforcement mechanism that tries to ultimately get to the same point as to whether soil is compromised, if that gets into the mechanics of how the drilling is undertaken and what the DEP's regulatory authority is versus our strict zoning ability.
I think I also want to be really mindful of us not stepping on DEP's toes for what is appropriate for them to regulate versus what is our purview. However, in this item, just looking at making sure they have to do the soil testing, maybe this is something that they also have to do for their DEP filings, but we're sort of just reaffirming it here. Perhaps I don't have the whole thing memorized, but I certainly like having the provision in here that they have to make sure to provide the information to us, and that it has to be an independent lab that we're okay with, because frankly, in my experience is that sometimes when you're trying to figure out what happened on a property, you go on a little bit of an archive dive, trying to reconstruct the history and what everyone was thinking at the time. And so the more information that the town has on hand that's immediately accessible if we're trying to understand what's happening, and the less that I have to go and try and get it from DEP or whatever other appropriate agency, I'd rather have that stuff on file, even if we're not necessarily the enforcer of something like a spill. So I think the main issue in this comment here is adding testing during drilling. Now this is above my technical, pay grade here for exactly when that would make sense to occur, how long these things tend to run. I think Kim mentioned, once a year. Are they going to be operating an unconventional well for several years? Is that something that commonly happens?
The drilling doesn't last that long, but the wells can last for 5 or 10 years. These deep wells, maybe longer.
Okay.
But the chance of further contamination when the well is just flowing is certainly diminished. Your problems are going to occur during the drilling activity for the most part.
And the drilling typically takes how long, did you say?
Well,
if you can guess.
How big is big? I mean, how many wells are you drilling off of the same pad? You might take 30 to 45 to 50 days per well. And most pads these days take more than one well. So it could be 6 months. You might be 6 months on a pad drilling. You might be longer, you might be a little less.
Now in this section here, we say well site, which I know we've had some discussion between pad versus well, and whether any of the changes to how those terms are structured might change the language throughout. But would well site cover those multiple pads if that's the case?
No,
Yeah.
no, the well site is going to cover things like tanks and separators and other pieces of equipment that might leak or cause contamination. The well
covers-
pad,
It covers well pads. It covers
Yeah.
well pads.
The well pad sits on the well site.
That's right.
yes. So-
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to
So
make
your
sure.
site will be more comprehensive.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is within 300 feet of each well site. So do we want to have, is there some sort of sensible during timeline that we could establish to put in a regulation for testing?
Are you gonna go outside the well site to test?
That's what would be required, yeah.
You might be outside of the property
Right.
where the well site and pad are located.
No. Well, my
True.
thoughts are, if it's gonna get outside the well site, it's gonna be on the well site. So if you just test your well site, and you find something, then you go and say, whoops, did this get away from us?
Tucker, would you like to weigh in on why we test from the well site?
I think the way it's set up is to make it as sort of far-reaching as possible and as protective as possible. That's why it's drafted the way it is. But you know, I certainly we could change that to within the well site if that's the recommendation of the Planning Commission. I don't see a problem with that. I think that the other question as to how often or when testing is appropriate beyond the beginning or prior to and then after. I defer to the experts on that if they have a recommendation.
Well, yeah, but if you find something on the well site, then wouldn't that, you'd say, whoops, I better look further on then and see if that flowed off the well site, which it shouldn't, but if it did, then we gotta know that.
No question. I think that includes some DEP involvement, as Brendan mentioned. If one of these tests turns up some sort of issue, I think that's a report to DEP that's made, and then whatever further investigation and remediation that's required. I think they're leading the charge on that.
Are we
They will.
trying to micromanage this?
Pardon me?
Are we trying to micromanage this? I mean,
Well, we're trying to balance, I think, as Brendan pointed out, we have these zoning powers, and sort of really the fundamental rule is, we can tell people where they can do this use, but we really can't tell them how they do it. And the case law recently has sort of expanded that where to say, well, where plus probably some additional zoning powers that protect the health, safety, and welfare of your residents. And so that's the fine line we're trying to walk here is, keeping things in the zoning sphere, not getting into the regulatory aspect of how these things actually operate, but, maintaining to the extent possible, protecting the residents of the town.
okay.
What if you did something like this where you said if the drilling activities take longer than 6 months, then they have to do one at 6 months?
One of the
Yeah.
major causes of contamination is the transporting of the fluid that's used in the fracking that has all the chemicals in it from after it's been put down the well, then it's brought up to the well, and then that material is put in trucks and carried away. So one of the breakdowns in the system is during that transportation, the transfer of the stuff that's down in the well to go into the trucks and then the trucks. There have been hundreds of reports in the media about these trucks leaking this fracking fluid with benzene and all these other carcinogens all over the road because they haven't been inspected. So it's not just for the drilling that's the problem, because all the waste that's coming up out of that where they put it in there under high pressure has to be removed or put in those pits. And so that's something to be concerned about too. Where are those trucks? Are they leaking this fluid? Did they fill them up yesterday and then they're sitting on site for 20 minutes or to finish, or 20 hours to get filled to the topped off, whatever they do? And is that leaking out of those trucks? So there's more ways for there to be contamination than just in the initial drilling.
Well, the fracking fluid only comes back during the drilling process, during the completion process, technically. You drill the well, then you frack it and complete it, and then you bring that fluid back out before you even start producing the well. all of that is the part of the overall drilling process. Once the well is completed and in production, there's no more fracking fluids that emerge out of the wellbore. They're
And-
already out.
And so when they bring up that gas that's been fracked out of that shell, there's no chemicals in that then?
Well, then the gas will go through what is called a separator, and any fluids, sometimes waters, sometimes brines, sometimes traces of anything, those go into this separator, which is a big, long tank, and they are separated out of that before the gas then goes into the pipeline for distribution. And then those fluids are continually handled. Mostly they are brines.
So, all right, so this is what I'm talking about.
But you'll also have likely production tanks on the pad that will hold your heavier hydrocarbons that are liquids that are produced. And those will generally, those are liquids on the pad that wouldn't go into a pipeline. So they are typically, you know, depending on how quote unquote wet the gas is with the heavier hydrocarbon content, emptied into trucks. And depending on the flow rate, the volume depends on how many trucks will go to the site. So if the issue and the concern is generally carcinogenic chemicals, etc., I'm not a biology major, but I mean, you will have trucks and the potential for leaks of diesel fluid from trucks. You will have hydrocarbons in tanks on the site for a significant period of time. So I think an aspect of the investigatory regime, to the extent there is one, is defining, is the focus to check for issues associated with the hydraulic fracturing process and the flowback, or is it to generally make sure that there are not leaks from whatever source into the soil? Because one may be more limited in scope and duration than the other.
It would probably be the distance, if you went 300 feet from the edge of the well site, the distance for that to leach basically would be pretty substantial. Because the trucks are very close to the well head, I would assume. So, if you took a test 300 feet outside the well site, you would have to have a lot of contaminants for it to travel that far away, I guess is what I'm thinking. Versus, some spillage on the ground at the transfer point. That makes sense, Dan? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
No, you're right. You're right. Your biggest, once the drilling process is completed and those frac fluids are gone, then your biggest issue is going to be the hydrocarbons that Brendan was talking about, which are the heavier hydrocarbons that might be in the gas stream. And those are held on the property. And there might be a tank leakage. That would be a problem or a situation. Now, you're supposed to have containment, secondary containment and all of that, so that you avoid that. But anything can happen. Anything can happen. What I'm trying to get at is Kim's point is that how long do you ask for this continual testing to go on? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think whatever we set, I would recommend that it would be when the developer is theoretically still active, involved, and in contact with the town, because from an enforcement perspective, if, after the initial post drilling test, if they disappear into the wind, the best thing I can do is send them a zoning notice, which might fine them a little bit. So, something that when we're still in contact regularly, however that would shake out with an operation like this, would be the most enforceable.
Well, one of the things that we were talking about is the heavier hydrocarbons. They're storing that till they get a full tank, then they're taking it out.
Right.
Okay, so we've been on this one for a little while. Oh, sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Its load can be checked pretty easy. Yeah, I was going to say the transporting any material is probably the most likely place you're going to have a leak that's not contained on site. And so perhaps that's the only place that really needs to be concerned heavily. This transportation area, where it goes, where they're driving their trucks. So,
How do you control that?
Yeah, that's could get kind of broad if we're looking at anywhere in town.
but as it leaves the site, and I'm talking about, they got an access road, and that's where they're going to have trouble as the truck leaves this, is loaded on the site, leaving the site, going down the access road. That's where they're going to have contamination, if there's going to be any. I just don't know where you're going to test them, because if they've got their tanks in a containment area and there's leaking of a tank, that's going to be contained. So the only leakage is when they're loading a truck or when they're driving a truck out. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Okay. I think we've been on this one for a minute, so
My
if we
dad
can,
had worked with it, Allied Chemical and Dye, and they had big tanks with coal tar and naphtha and benzene and stuff. And those big, I used to climb up on top of them. Anyway, they
Smoking
had
a cigarette, probably.
around,
oh,
and they did have during the war, and they thought it was sabotage. It's just one of those big tanks got blown up, and everything was kept in that moated area, and it didn't leak out. So so if this is done correctly, the possibility of containment in the site is probably very small. But the process of moving something off-site, that's where you could have a leak in your valves on the trucks and so on and so forth, which is probably unlikely, but could happen. I'm done.
all right, group, what is our consensus feel on this item?
Well, I think they clearly ought to do testing, and I think DEP requires this before and after all of the drilling. Kim's point was it ought to be done during. Now, I don't know how effective that's going to be. As I said, most of the drilling activity is going to be over and done in 6 months. So do you really want something tested at 3 months, 1 month prior, 3 months in, and then at the 6 month period? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to tell you. I think the example you were using, Kim, is the long-term contamination, where something was a slow leaker or a slow contaminator, and you should have noticed it, but nobody noticed it for 20 years. So those are different scenarios. One is a drilling process, which is short-term. One is the site itself, which could last for 10, 15, 20 years.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Whatever is happening on the site, where there could be, I'm looking at the statistics here, 16% of hydraulic fractured oil and gas wells spill liquids every year. They found that 6,600 releases from fractured wells happened over a 10-year period. So stuff is getting out somewhere. Whether it's when they're building it, whether it's when they're loading it in the trucks with the carbons, whether they're loading it in, they're letting it sit there in a tank. My point is, I don't want 20 years and then us go, oh my gosh, look, we didn't notice this. That's what I'm saying. So and now we got a big problem. So I'm saying that we need to test before the end. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to say it again. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think probably what you're suggesting is something like an annual or every 2 years, every 3 years kind of a test around the perimeter of the site.
or where the trucks are parked, or wherever these experts say there's most likely to be a leak. I'm not going to tell the experts where to look for the gas. They ought to know that. So we have these experts and say, go check it out and see if there are some leaks we need to worry about over there. Then they go and they do that.
Okay, so let's stick with the location parameters we've got outlined in this section here with the feet and the well site and whatnot. But do we want to add every couple years, every year they have to test, any of that interesting to the group?
Are we trying to duplicate standards that are federal or state standards that are already in place? I mean, are we trying to micromanage this a little too much?
Well, I don't know that, and maybe the lawyers could tell us as to what the DEP requirements for testing around site activities might be. I don't know.
I don't know what those regulations are. I was actually fishing for that while you guys were in that last discussion. But I think, again, I don't need to kind of restate what we're trying to do here. I mean, I think the idea is we're trying to maintain whatever level of monitoring to the extent it's duplicative. I think the important thing is that someone's doing this, someone's monitoring the soil. And I think if we can increase that, I think that's a reasonable regulation for the town to place on this type of activity to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its residents. So, I mean, I think we're okay with the soil testing, and I know we've this horse is down there and been lagging for a while now. So, I think if we do maybe let me suggest an annual testing. Obviously, we're all gonna council's gonna get a crack at this. You're gonna get another crack at this on its way back through. So, at least to see that and bless the final version. So, just to kind of keep things moving, why don't we do annual if that's okay with Kim and there's no objection from the commissioners?
Fine.
Yeah, I think, but where are you do we say where on the site we're gonna test?
No, let the experts do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably an industry standard that we would hope that these state labs would apply. And I think by setting the 300 feet, again, to the extent it's within the same property, I think that's a reasonable regulation or restriction or requirement to put on there.
And I'm thinking where the handling and the transfer of materials occurs. That's where you're going to have it.
That makes sense.
Gavin, just real quick though, if the 300 feet was on somebody else's property, how would that play?
Well, I think we may want to, and that's a good point, Rob. We may want to say 300 feet or the edge of the lot, whichever is further.
Okay, because I can see Brendan's
I'm
point.
sorry, whichever is less. Or, you know what I'm saying. So if the 300 feet, we don't want them going on other people's property. Then you have property right permission issues, things like that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a good point. We can clarify that.
I think functional with the setbacks is drafted functionally that it's probably going to end up on their property if we're doing 300 feet. But I agree that the edge of the lot language is good because you never know.
Yeah, you never know. You get a weird shaped lot with something happening on it.
Agreed.
Make it
Okay.
clear.
I'm giving it a green check.
Green check 1 year. 10 o'clock.
So this next one here is relating to protected structures. On the updated draft, it's 2T under the express criteria. Now I'm gonna mostly turn this point over to Gavin and Katie because we discussed this earlier, and I think there was some language they wanted to work with the protected structures here, just due to the fact that they're 1,000 feet. Anything that's a dwelling, an occupied building, essentially within 1,000 feet of the site is considered a protected structure, and there are certain things that get imposed on any development that happens within 1,000 feet of a protected structure as currently drafted. However, the setback for this entire type of development as currently drafted is also 1,000 feet. So unless there's one of those weird situations where there was some sort of waiver variance, whatever, this shouldn't be happening within 1,000 feet of a protected structure. Now,
right.
if the distance for anything, the radius included, that would include protected structures, were to change or become greater, this might be in play again. However, a lot of these regulations in this section seem like just good regulations in general. I'll just list off a couple really quick things for the languages existing. There was a reference to open pits in there. That is going to be deleted, since, as we already discussed, those aren't permitted. Water impoundment. This was something that Kim and I discussed. There was a question as to whether if another landowner that was not on this oil and gas development site wanted to, if the operator of the well wanted to subcontract out the water impoundment to somebody else's property, could they do that? The answer is that would be considered an additional oil and gas development use, and so they would have to go through the entire conditional use approval process before that could even be considered. Functionally, I assume it's not going to happen based on that. And I believe that's everything I had for the languages existing. Gavin and Katie, what you got for this section?
Yes, so I think this is an easy fix. It was basically just a carryover. The way that this section starts is that in the event that there is oil and gas development within this 1,000 feet of a protected structure, then here's the regulations that kick in. And that ties into the existing ordinance as it was passed back in, I guess, 2010 or whatever that was, whatever year that was.
Okay.
So I think simply removing that provision, that referencing that development, and just having those restrictions and requirements apply to all oil and gas development, and not, I think we just eliminate that within 1,000 feet because it's not permitted anyway. And I think that cleans everything up. So it's even though it's I think that's an easy fix, to be honest with you.
Gavin, what if somebody applied for a variance on that, though?
Well, they'd have to meet the variance standards, and those are difficult standards to meet. But I mean, it would depend on a case-by-case basis as to whether they could establish they meet the criteria.
Right, but would we want them, if they were applied, let's say they applied for, let's say it was at 750 feet or something, and they applied for a variance. The neighbor who was there didn't object, but now their house would be within the 1,000 feet. How do we then make sure that those protections would then apply?
Well,
they're going to
the language that I think Gavin's proposing is essentially just moving those protections out to any structure that would be within 1,000. What is it? 1,000 feet.
Well, I mean, right now the old ordinance follows the DEP 500-foot setback.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we apply for, whether there's a protected structure within 1,000 feet, we apply some additional requirements, health, safety, and welfare requirements. And I think if we just say, hey, look, we're not worried about how far everything is from a protected structure, we're going to apply those health, safety, and welfare requirements for any oil and gas development, regardless of how close that structure is, so that these protections are going to be there. And it's not, if there is a variance, then fine, the variance is granted, but these things are still in place.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of these are like about fencing, safety fencing, locking gates, posting warning signs, which, even if this ends up on a contiguous area of 10 acres and it's super remote, if there is a super remote place in the town, kids do some wacky things, like they'll find it if they want to explore the site when they've got their first car and they're hanging out with their friends. So, I mean, I think these are reasonable security measures.
Yeah, I mean, Jim likes to climb up on Benji.
Right, yeah, we're going to get a car full of Jims and they're going to drive up here and not see a warning sign. So, personally, I think that these just make sense as criteria, performance standards anyway. Yeah. So if we're good with that, we'll just do that.
Okay.
All right. Green checking it. All right. The next item I had was, I believe that's the next section. I've got 2U for the updated numbering. This is about the construction activity permitted hours and time frame. Comment that I got about this was, can we limit the construction hours permitted to a more restrictive range than is otherwise permitted in our typical land development. And Gavin and Katie, I think you had some comments about this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I certainly understand the comment, but my concern is we have a noise ordinance that has construction activity time period from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's when that's what's in the current oil. I think that reference is in the current oil and gas ordinance as well. So I guess we would have to find a rational basis as to why we would want to further regulate these construction activities versus, those folks who are constructing, some other sort of development. And, if this is the only type of development, this is sort of one of Brendan's points earlier on, how do we justify treating this use when it comes to the construction portion differently than other uses? And I think, what we're talking about, as I think, is the actual initial construction stage of creating the well pad, the grading, the construction of the well bore and all that good stuff. And some of my terminology might be off, but I'm sure I'll get corrected. And then once these things are up and running, they're running 24/7. So we're only really talking about the construction phase and the time of day within which that can occur.
Leave it alone.
I think you'd lose in court, and I'm not a lawyer, but you let them build McCandless Crossing with that requirement. How can you not? I mean, they probably move more dirt than anybody in the town has in a long time.
I agree. I don't think you can be more restrictive than you are with anyone else.
Correct.
All right, so we're getting a thumbs down from the group, it sounds like. All right. It's getting a red X. All right, the PPC plan comments. I believe that Kim's comment on here was that we wanted to make sure that anything that was submitted was up to DEP standards, and that if anything changed with the plan, if there was a new version or anything, they had to send us the new version. Town attorney is okayed this from a legal standpoint. Do we have any issues with including this?
Nope.
All right, and this, I also made a note from earlier about the safety data sheets, that those have to be included in the materials provided. All right, that one was easy. Noise complaint response. This is letter W, numbers 5 and 6 under there. So moving right along, I think it's the PPC plan was this one's W. Dan made a comment that 10 days after any required noise testing is concluded is an awful long time for them to have to schedule a meeting with the town to address. In fact, whatever is going on that would be making the noise might just be done at that point because they've already had to take the time to conduct a test. Gavin and Katie suggested that we could reduce that window to 5 days, since the suggestion was to make it shorter.
Okay.
What starts the 5 days? When you get the results?
Yes.
I'd make it 48 hours.
Yeah, if there's a well blowing or some high-pitched noise going on, which might happen, if you got to listen to it for 5 days, that's a long time.
It is.
I could sign off on 48. I think 48 hours is okay.
Okay. So we're gonna say can decrease the window to contact the town to address the complaint after testing to 2 days / 48 hours. However makes sense to represent in there. I'm not picky, but 2 days for my brain. We good for a green check?
Yep.
Back away.
All right. Temporary housing. This is something that comes up in a couple different spots. One is this is section X. And then I think there's something about it on the contents of the application section. The comment was just that we wanted to make sure the language is clear, that no on-site residence is actually permitted. There's likely going to be 24/7 security, a guardhouse, some sort of comfort building, but just that we didn't want people sleeping and living there full time.
Well, for what period of time? Because during the drilling of the well, which I said might take 4, 5, 6 months if you've got multiple wells, there is an operator there 24 hours a day. And they typically will, there's usually a trailer that serves as the, command center, and they might have a bunk in there. But they have to monitor that drilling activity continuously. And they
Do they
will
not do it
sleep.
in shifts?
They can, but there is generally somebody sleeping in there only during the drilling activity, not once the well is completed, but only during that drill.
How are they monitoring while they're sleeping? I don't get away
Well,
with that at the hospital.
Two people.
They are there.
Supervisory.
Little snooze with the anesthesia.
No, I don't get away with that. I gotta be awake.
There might be someone who's watching the well while the supervisor who knows what to do if a problem arises is sleeping. And if a problem arises, they will wake him and say, "Come here and tell me what to do," that kind of a thing. There is typically somebody in that trailer during the drilling of the well almost all the time. And they might be sleeping some of those hours of the day.
And I think the genesis of these particular concerns was in the old days when there were sites out in the middle of nowhere and the workers were literally sleeping on site just because it would be 30 or 40 miles to, the motel if you're out in Tioga County or the wilds of Greene County, where that's just not going to happen here. So I think that there probably needs to be an appreciation of that differing circumstance, and then a question of, is there a necessity for some kind of supervisory person to be on site versus a full-time dormitory style situation, say, at a fire hall, if someone is there overnight for whatever reason. They're not necessarily living there. They're not necessarily on duty, but they're there in case of a particularized situation, which I think is probably the way to look at it. I mean, I don't want anyone sleeping out on a well site, but if it's, on cold call, I don't necessarily know how that's harmful or inconsistent with the practice or zoning, so long as they're not taking up residence.
Yeah, Brandon, I had to laugh on your in-document comments when you mentioned like the wilds of Washington and Greene. And there were a couple of years there where you just couldn't rent an apartment in Washington because it was all, the well techs and workers, and housing was an issue there for a little bit.
So we had additionally, go ahead, Jim, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, can we put something in there if there is a temporary trailer there, and for that is oftentimes there's more than one person. One guy sits there with a nap. And so, but they're there 24 hours a day. Maybe not the same, nevertheless. Once the well is completed, then that has to be removed.
It usually is, yeah. And I would agree with that.
So we had initially suggested making Kim's change, but based on that sort of background, maybe it makes sense to have some sort of limited temporary housing during how did you describe that?
Well, it's hardly temporary housing. That's maybe the wrong terminology.
Yeah.
Somebody might be taking a nap or sleeping there to be able to respond immediately to an emergency. I don't know that I consider that temporary housing.
So do you think that would be covered under comfort building?
Is that any different than a medical professional in say, a resident in a hospital just sleeping in the doctor's lounge or the nurse's lounge or whatever the case may be? I mean, that to me is more akin to what this is versus actual housing.
The definition of temporary housing is any tent, trailer, mobile home, or other structure used for human shelter, which is designated to be transportable and which is not attached to the ground or any other utility system on the premises for more than 30 days. That's the definition on Google.
Well, that's their temporary office then, because in a temporary trailer and set it up. So you've they're going to create something with that even without having somebody live there to meet that definition. I
Right.
mean, Dan, they're not going to shower there. They're not going to eat every meal there. You know that.
No, but there will be somebody perhaps snoozing to refresh themselves, but ready to respond to an emergency.
Right.
But it's not I take offense that not offense, but I don't think it's temporary housing. That's the wrong terminology.
It's not a double wide with guys in a bed, 6 bed.
It's a construction trailer. You had them over there at the high schools.
I agree. I'm totally. I don't think it's an issue, but I don't know how you regulate it per se.
Well, I think as drafted, it states.
What are you really concerned about anyway? Is it that they would move their family in with them, or that you'll have 40 guys on one site, or what's your real problem with this?
Right. Just noise, shenanigans.
I think the old issue was, guys with free time.
Right. Work's done, so we're going to just goof off up here and hang around and
drink some beer and cause a ruckus. Yeah.
And disturb everybody all around and get on our streets and make trouble. And they need to stay in a hotel. They need to stay someplace else. If there's like one guy that has to be there, that's one thing. But if you got 5 guys, 6 guys, 10 guys, then I don't think that's a good idea.
And I agree with you.
So the way it reads currently,
that's not what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, the way it reads currently is a temporary on-site housing during vertical and horizontal drilling or fracking for essential personnel not to exceed 3 individuals to provide 24-hour supervision, security, and safety is permitted, provided they give us background clearances.
Okay.
Sounds like what Dan said might happen.
I don't have any problem with that.
No, I don't either.
Okay.
No, I think that covers it from my standpoint.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
All right, so we got a solution for this one. Am I giving it a green check with context?
Yeah, what Gavin read off sounds fine.
All right.
I think that means a red X, RJ, because that means we're not going to make a change.
Oh, we're not going to make change. All right. So that's a red X.
If I'm following your color coding system.
You are, and I came extremely prepared. So
where's that definition, Gavin, again?
That is.
Because I don't remember seeing
it's under
that.
Employees.
Okay.
It's under employees, contractors, and subcontractors. I think it's either W, or I think I'm one off on my lettering on the word what I'm working with, but it's
I've got X.
Okay, so X, page 22-ish.
I think we need a table of contents.
Yes, that is under the general comments, and that is getting a green check from me. I don't care what anyone else says.
Because you can't find anything in here.
Yeah, once it gets this unwieldy and large, I think table of contents makes a lot of sense.
Okay,
yep.
Good.
All right, well, that's easy. I can check the table of contents off now. All right, so we're doing red X for temp housing. We're good on this one?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so the next one is letter Y, trucks and routes. Kim had a comment on, we want to make sure that we actually codify the no idling legislation, law, regulations. There's a state law regarding that. We just want to codify it into our ordinance. I would also suggest, just in case the ordinance, or excuse me, the state legislation changes over time to be more restrictive. I think it's anything, you can't do anything more than 5 minutes continuously in a 60-minute period. If that were to become more restrictive, we would, theoretically, the state legislation should control, but just to avoid becoming obsolete in our own regulations, maybe we want to add something like, or if, whatever is the more restrictive regulation, should there be a change? I don't know, however the lawyers say that part, but that's the gist. Do we want to
just reference the state ordinance, the state?
Yes, which might Let me see if that's how it's written currently. Oh, I got to scroll through probably 10 pages now.
Yeah, it says additionally, the applicant shall comply with the idling limitations contained in the Pennsylvania Diesel Powered Motor Vehicle Idling Act, Act 124 of 2008.
Yeah, so do we want to
Or-
explicitly state what those are in here?
Gavin, don't you just have to add or any future revisions or something?
As it may,
As
as it
may
may
be
be amended, you
amended.
could say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I would
all you
do
need
that.
to say. Don't even get into the details.
Okay, so I've got as it may be amended. The second comment was a suggestion to make sure that any inspection files involved in the vehicles that are kept on site, that the inspection files be kept there as well, and that the town is able to inspect them as we deem necessary.
I have a question. If you've got temporary housing, can that material be kept there while drilling is going on?
Well, the temporary housing, if you want to call it that, is all going to be in this big construction trailer. So yeah, it could be in there. Most of that trailer is for construction activity and looking at data and blueprints and things.
Right.
And there might be a corner that's got a cot in it there, a guy is sleeping. But yeah, they could be kept in that construction trailer.
If they can
Which
fit a
will be-
filing cabinet, I say they keep it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. File. I'm just skimming through here to make sure I understand which piece this applies to. Ah, here we go. It was number 6. Trucks shall be inspected regularly to ensure the contents of the truck's loads are not inadvertently dripped onto town roads. So the inspection records would be relating to that. So keep those records on site, have them available for our inspection should we deem it necessary. Up, down?
Fine.
All right. Getting that part of green check. There was also a mention about whether we could limit where construction entrances, routes, things like that. You know, do trucks have to adhere to a certain volume of road? Arterial roads are mentioned. You know, I'm a little iffy on that system overall, just because it hasn't been updated for a couple comp plans, and our regulatory references in our ordinance refer to 2 comprehensive plans ago for a map of those. That's something that over time I would just like to update, but if there is another way, or you know, a more generalized way to control where construction entrances are, maybe we have to have an approved route or something like that for accessing it. You know, legal, help me out. What are we allowed to do? Bond the road?
We require a traffic study, right? We're going to require road bonding. And, you know, I think that's usually where those details are worked out, in my experience and other, I mean, that this is one of the major issues. You know, should this use ever come to McCandless, the traffic route, especially of the water trucks, will be probably one of the biggest sort of impact items, at least again, in my limited experience in other communities, that the most complaints were received regarding this sort of convoy of water trucks. So I would say that the traffic study process would involve, you know, sort of some proposals and sort of almost a collaboration to an extent, as to what makes the most sense, because, you know, these folks don't want to go on small roads. They want the most direct routes. And so I think there is sort of a common goal that can be achieved through the traffic study process as it's set up in there.
Yeah, and just one question. In the traffic study, will they identify roads that have posted limits?
Yes.
Because that's really going to be the restrictor. That's
right.
A restrictor, because you have many roads that are 10-ton limit, whatever they may be, that they need to make sure they're not traveling on.
Is there any bonding required?
Yes.
Okay.
If the traffic study's doing that, I'm good with it.
Yep.
All
same
right.
here.
So that. All right. Next one. Unconventional well mention. This is in section Z, number 3. Dan mentioned that this is the first, well, I said the word mention about 5 times, but you know what, it's 10:30, so forgive me. This is the first mention of unconventional well in the ordinance. Now, I spoke to Gavin and Katie about this. They did point out that it's not additionally defined in this ordinance because the Oil and Gas Act already addresses what sort of the official definition for that is. I hesitate to just restate definitions that are already in acts that are beyond our control as to whether they get amended. We don't want to risk becoming obsolete. However, if we do want to put in a definition, the state's definition is a borehole drilled or being drilled for the purpose of or to be used for the production of natural gas from an unconventional formation. So do we or do we not want to add that?
What's it hurt?
Yeah,
What's
I
it
mean, unless for some reason the state changes that official definition and then we just have an ordinance that's out of date. I don't know how
There are
much.
conventional wells and there are unconventional wells. Nobody's drilling a conventional well anymore. They're not
Right.
economic anymore. So all the things we've been talking about, fracking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those are all unconventional wells. So I just want to make sure that people understand what an unconventional well is. It's a deep fractured shale well. And if we want to add the definition, then that just clarifies it.
We can add that definition in.
All right, green check.
Okay.
We're on to page 2. Great job, team. This is the last
Page
one.
2 out of what?
Well, no, it's just out of 2.5, and I think we've actually addressed a bunch of the stuff on the half as we've gone through. So there's the light at the end of this gas well. This last one under the express criteria, this is section CC because we have looped back to the beginning of the alphabet at this point. Number 7 under that. This is regarding liquid separators. Dan had some suggestions about secondary containment regulations that we all thought were solid. So unless there's any objection, we're going to add those in. Also, there was a clarifying question asked to make sure this does not cover separating or cracking activities.
Well, those are 2 different things. Separating, a gas stream is separated. Liquids are dropped out of it. So that happens with every gas stream. Cracking is a whole different process. That's like a refining process. That's what they're building in Butler, in Beaver County.
Oh yeah, I drove past that the other day and did not realize that was the cracking plant. And
oh my God, a cracking facility is monumental and huge.
Yeah, I was like, what are all these cranes here for? And then I Googled cracking plant, out of curiosity if it was related, and realized that was the plant,
Separation is very simple. It's basically a gravity-fed process. There won't be any cracking in McCandless. None.
Yeah, I'm gonna need more than 10 acres for that one from what I eyeballed. But I think that the question was just asked to make sure we weren't inadvertently covering that with this regulation. Okay.
In my opinion, you're not inadvertently covering cracking in an oil and gas drilling ordinance.
All right, we have made it through express criteria. Now we're down to contents of the application. There are just a couple, I'll go through the actual language questions here, but also again, I did want to come back to the issue of, do we want to actually codify all of these pieces in an ordinance? Do we want this to be sort of either an appendix attachment or like one of our standard downloadable forms? so that everyone can see what's on it. But it's something that's maintained administratively, so it doesn't have to sit in the code and take up another 10 pages or whatever. I mean, I'm fine with either personally, but it just might be a little more simple to manage it administratively. However, that's part two. Part one of this, we just got 2 sections we're looking at.
RJ,
Yes.
real quick, I'm going to close my computer. I got to move to a different room and plug in.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll let you back in.
I'm just going to shut it down while I carry it to a different space. So in case I go away, keep going.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so the issue here, the first one is, this is letter D, number 19, geophysical report and seismic testing. Dan suggested that we might want to increase the notice period if somebody is planning on undertaking seismic testing. Right now it's 48 hours. You know, just the question was, what if somebody needs to shore up a structure prior to the seismic testing being done? From what I understand, it involves explosions. So I understand that point. The suggestion from Gavin and Katie was bumping it out to 72 hours, and it has to be proven in writing. Also, just in general, there's been a couple questions about a seismic testing ordinance, and since we referenced seismic testing, should we not have a matching ordinance to cover it? I understand that South Fayette and Peters Township are a couple examples of solid ones. Gavin and Katie did mention that concurrently with this, they've also been you know, putting together a working draft for a seismic testing ordinance, and it could be ready for review and adoption pretty quickly. Now, that would not be a zoning ordinance. That would just be in our general code of ordinances. I've seen them live both in zoning and outside of zoning. I would recommend outside specifically.
We
for
don't have a
seismic
site. We don't have a seismic ordinance.
we do not.
Oh, I thought we did. Son of a
A
gun.
lot of people don't actually. A lot of oil and gas ordinances reference it, you know, which I assume is in the case that the municipality ever adopts one, but a lot of them don't have one. So.
Well, my biggest concern was giving notice to people around, because it involves underground explosions, and then you measure the sound waves. And those are developed way before 72 hours. I mean, I don't know why you don't give a week or 2 weeks worth of notice. So if some guy has an old barn that he wants to make sure doesn't collapse, he can either object, or he can shore it up, or he can do something.
I'm not married to 72 hours, Dan. So if we want to make it a week or whatever you think is reasonable, 2 weeks is even fine by me, if that's how that normally works.
Yeah, that would be the example. Some guy got a 100-year-old barn built on a rubble foundation, and the seismic causes the thing to collapse, something like that. And you ought to be able to give a week or 2 worth of notice easily.
What do you think, Katie? You see any issue?
No, I agree. I just had suggested 72 as a doubling of the 48, but I don't see any issue with increasing it to a week or 2.
All right, 1 week or 2 week?
Pick one, doesn't matter. I'd go 2 weeks, see what happens.
You're the guy that knows. You gotta tell me. You said you'd go with 2 weeks?
Yeah,
I would
2
go
weeks.
2 weeks. Oh,
Okay.
I think the poor guy with the old barn's gonna lose it anyway.
Yeah. All right, so green check for, I'm gonna say for all of the above, because unless anyone has an objection to them continuing to finish up that seismic testing ordinance, it sounds like something that we all think is a good idea, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we're not gonna see that one back at the planning commission because it's not gonna be a zoning ordinance, but.
Like, they'll go along with a vehicle and do that same thing. And just
I'm
send
sorry,
it.
I missed the beginning.
With a vehicle, they'll go around and they'll hit with shock waves and map places
Yeah.
as well.
The thumper truck.
Yeah, the thumper truck.
But
Okay.
you know they're there.
Oh, here we got Rob coming back in here. Okay, so I'm green checking that one. The last item we have under contents of application is section 21F, plugging. I think that Dan's comment was essentially it would be hard to really predict when plugging would exactly occur, and that, you know, how would you really mandate what's being regulated in the section. The response from Gavin and Katie was that this section is really only meant to estimate the schedule of operation, for example, when plugging would occur, and it essentially acknowledges the schedule would need to be updated over time and based on a number of variables. Again, this one is over my technical pay grade, so I will let you two talk it out.
Well, it just didn't make sense to me. You haven't even drilled the well yet. And the well, once drilled, could operate for 10, 15, 20 years. And you're asking them in the application process to drill it, to also give you a plugging plan? That just doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, the way it's set up is just estimates. So, I mean, if it's really, you know, if you go in, you really have no idea when you're going to be plugging and it's not possible to do an estimated time, then it sounds like we need to remove it.
Yeah,
I just don't see how you get productive information from that.
Yeah,
you
would have to give such a generic program that it's meaningless anyway.
Okay. When we've determined it's no longer viable economically, we will plug it in accordance with state law. Is probably all that anyone would get, and that's practically nothing.
Does it say a plugging plan or a revitalization plan of the area?
It says the schedule shall indicate the anticipated beginning and ending dates for the following activities. It includes well site prep, drilling, completion, stimulation, plugging, and then ultimately it does include site restoration at the end. So we wouldn't be taking out site restoration, although it sounds like we really be kind of struggling with a timing standpoint for site restoration. Maybe I don't know.
Oh no, you can restore the site after the drilling is done while the well is still flowing. So you can restore the site after 6 months or 9 months, but you don't plug the well until it's stopped producing, which might be 20 years in the future.
We'll yank plugging out of there. It seems to make sense.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna, the alteration here is just chopping plugging from this section, yes? Okay. All right, remove reference to plugging. All right, so those were the only functional and language comments directly from this section. But overall, do we want to commit to the application materials being codified? Of course, that would mean that if you want to change anything that's included, you got to do it by zoning ordinance. Again, I'll go, I could go either way on it, but
well, you got to do this sometime, don't you?
Huh?
I said you got to pull the switch sometime, don't you? I mean, we might as well just vote on it and be done with it at this point.
This ordinance, we're close actually. I've just got a couple general comments, and then I know Brendan had some formatting and different inline comments with the document. So I mean, hey, unless you're calling the vote, you could do that, but
well, if you got more stuff, that's different. But it sounded like you were done.
We're almost done. Yeah, oh no, just with the contents of the application part, which I mean that's the bulk of it. But
well,
do we want to codify the application materials in the ordinance?
What do you want
is the
done?
real question here.
What do you want done?
I mean, it's essentially, this is kind of similar to the 5D where we decided to add an entire section that says the application has to consist of da 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 da, all these different items. A lot of these are also represented in the express criteria. We're kind of just restating some of them to say, and they also have to be present in an application. Theoretically, from the perspective of the person who would be receiving the application, to figure out if it was complete, I would open up this section of the zoning code and go down the list and say, can we figure out if they're going to do all of these things? And these documents should be provided in our attempt to review that. But again, if the group feels better having them actually laid out in our actual codified ordinances, that's okay too. I don't know if it's necessary.
What is your recommendation? This is your job.
That's the same question I asked you.
Handle developing it administratively, personally. It was just something that the commission and everyone was okay with on the 5G, and I didn't know if that was kind of the direction we wanted to go with applications.
What is your recommendation?
Just let us do it in the office.
Okay,
Okay, that's
that's good
fine.
enough. That's good enough for me.
I would
Yeah.
do it wherever it's easiest to ultimately change it.
There we go. That's a good basis. All right. So we're
Next.
gonna go with admin. So Gavin and Katie, you can just delete that whole section.
That'll be several pages of
Yeah.
state.
I'll make it shorter. A little easier to read, I think.
We will double check to make sure that, cross-reference the express criteria
Yes.
to make sure there's nothing that slips through there that we weren't otherwise covering. So,
Right.
but yeah, that should be fine.
All right, last two general comments one was from Kim. There was language regarding an affidavit from an engineering consultant, copies of any previous enforcement issues, fines, etc., assessed against the applicant for the facility works in Butler County. Should work here. Any opposition to adding that? All right, screen check. Last item in general comments is lighting restrictions. There was a question about whether we should be looking at explicit lighting restrictions using, for example, the foot candle system. That's something that is present in our district common standards. So unless we want to do something more restrictive than what is already our default, I'm not sure that we need to restate it here. But again, that's, I would make sure that it would not be less restrictive than what's in the district common standards and our subdivision land development design standards. I think we're probably okay.
Would they be lighting anything other than the well site, the well pad, or whatever you want to call it?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
During drilling,
it
it will
as
be
opposed
lit.
to the entire piece of property.
Maybe
They-
the vehicle, if they've got vehicles and or tanks there, those will be lit.
Not at night, usually.
Well,
I mean, during drilling, all of this will be lit, but post-drilling, I'm not sure anything's going to be lit.
The
Yeah,
town,
and
maybe-
the town's all the whole parking lot down at the town is lit because the vehicles down there all night long, every night of the year.
But that's construction.
No, town hall.
Oh,
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
after,
well, and we do
It's
have the
security.
police there as well.
Security
Yeah.
is what they say. So is this going to be lit everywhere, the whole place, like the sun?
Probably
Have an
the-
ordinance
the
already.
light, the
I mean, they got a
equivalent
big
of
site here, don't they?
Yeah, well, presumably it's not supposed to be developed on any contiguous space less than 10 acres, as this is written.
And it's going to be 1,000 feet from any structure also, right?
Right. And currently the way that we would evaluate lighting in any other, more pedestrian use would be that it has to not have light spillover essentially to a pretty restrictive extent from our current foot candle standards. But again, this is just a comment that was on there. If we want to look at making anything more restrictive, it's up to the group.
I would say you would lose in court again if you tried to do something you're not doing anywhere else. But again, that's a Gavin call.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a very sort of limited section on lighting. It talks about, recognizing that adequate and appropriate lighting is essential to the safety of those involved in the development. The operator shall direct site lighting downward and inward toward the drill site, wellhead, or other area being developed so as to minimize glare on public roads and adjacent buildings within 300 feet of the well site or other area to be developed.
Would they be, would we be requiring a photometric plan?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's really all I think you need.
All right. Well, we've gotten through all of the very specific criteria comments. Brendan had some really good overarching comments as to what district. Right now it's an I and C2. I think we've settled that Ingomar is not the place to even have it as a conditional use, so that one's getting chopped. As currently in the pending ordinance draft, for expediency's sake, it just remains in the institutional district. I know that there have been several different takes on what the best way to accomplish it is. I'm just going to give my 2 cents before we head off into, the wild blue yonder on what I'm sure is a tough topic to wrestle with. None of our purpose statements or district intents really fit this use, frankly. And I could say that just as much for any of our commercial districts as I would for institutional development, RC. We don't really have a district in the town that's meant for heavy industrial use. The one that's named industrial is light industrial, the way that it was originally drafted, which you can get away from, certainly, and was supposed to be for any sort of industrial manufacturing use that could be completely contained in a building with no noise from the outside. So definitely not this. Although I would not necessarily use an overlay district as my first tool, frankly, that's the best idea that I have. I've talked it over with the town manager. We think that from the perspective of, we don't really have a manufacturing or true heavy industry district. It worked in Franklin Park. As far as I know, it hasn't been challenged. That would be our suggestion to explore at this point. So the floor is open on this subject.
You don't have an actual district area defined yet, do you?
No, and I'm not, we haven't gotten into exploring this far enough for me to have a recommendation, but I just looking at, if we're not going to just continue to let it exist in institutional, which I understand there are concerns that are valid about that, there's not really anywhere else that I would stick it that I wouldn't either, I think, be in direct conflict with the character and function of the district when it comes to the commercial ones, or wouldn't essentially end up being risk of exclusion because the district is so small. So that's my concerns with our existing zoning structure.
Can we create a paper district for this, but not put it on a map?
Well, see, it was an interesting concept for sure. However, my concern with that would be if somebody wants to use that paper district. What Brendan's talking about is essentially you create this district, it's got the regulations, setbacks, permitted uses and whatever, but you don't zone anything on the map as that district to start out. An applicant would have to pursue that rezoning. I don't see a situation in which that wouldn't end up being spot zoning in function, just because there's no contiguous area on the map that the district would be rezoned next to. If we're already contemplating the fact that none of our districts are really suited in purpose or intent to industrial use, then there could, I think, very easily be a challenge as to whether zoning any parcel, that paper industrial district wouldn't be spot zoning out of character with the neighboring properties. So, I get the thinking behind it, but I'd be concerned about it legally. Gavin, Katie, legal people, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm always hesitant to create a zoning district that doesn't exist because I think you're setting yourself up for a potential curative amendment for having it placed. If you don't, granted, I'm not. First of all, you did a great intro and you really hit on all the issues, and Brendan hit on a lot of great issues in his comments, and they were very similar too. So, I'm not saying there's an easy answer. Obviously, this is the $1 million question right here, but I do. I don't think that the paper district's the way to go, but I don't have I can't tell you what the right answer is either. We're certainly happy to receive some input from the commission.
So this says overlay to me. I'm old fashioned.
You showed me this once and I enjoyed it.
Okay, so I put this right on this map. Let me show you right where I put this. There's one. And literally just put it right over where there's Perry Highway, there's Montclair. I am too tired to be doing this right now. Down where the TGI Fridays was. You can't see it, but I have it just laid over there. And that's the place that I think the overlay would be. All the way back to this, that property goes all the way back to the CVS. That's a big parcel of property. It borderlines major roads on a couple of sides. There's hardly no residential around it. That's the only place I can find on the map. That's my suggestion. Big response.
Oh, look, you know what? I'll throw him a bone here. I feel like the actual shape of the overlay is something that's going to require some fiddling around with maps.
Well, it just goes along the roads.
Are you talking about McKnight Road where
I'm
Pittsburgh
talking
Office and
about
Research Park
McKnight,
is?
right where
Up to McCandless
Perrymont,
Crossing.
on the other side of Perrymont. You know where Perrymont. Let me see.
Yeah,
Was that Babcock?
Or the Pittsburgh Research Park, Ted.
that's what I thought. That's what I thought you
Yeah.
were saying.
I
Pittsburgh
mean, I'm not
Office and
seeing it.
Research Park.
Yeah.
She said where TGI Fridays was, so.
Yeah.
All of that property up there, where they talked about putting the restaurants that haven't been built and the daycare that hasn't been built and all of that whole big property up there. Corporate Drive, all that Corporate Drive business.
Right.
That's the only place I can see that we could possibly make an overlay there, and there's plenty of ground to do it.
What about where Vincentian's at? Why wouldn't you let them drill there?
Isn't there residential all around that?
On the far end past, on Peebles Road on the left past it, but the rest of it's the school, the fields, the nun house. I mean, the whatever it was, nun house, that term, sure. Yeah, that's it. I mean,
you're allowed to say nun house.
yeah, I know. That was just old school me. So I mean, I don't know that. Again, I go back in history, and I'm one of the old timers, a little bit, not quite as old as some of the guys, but that's why institutional was picked, because it provided some reasonable areas for somebody to do this potentially. Whether we like that designation or not, that's why it was tagged there, because it really gave them the only really district that would work. But if it's legal to create some other overlay district, then that's a whole new game that I'm not sure how you.
Weren't you talking at one point about doing this out in North Park?
Not me.
An overlay
near
district in
North Park.
North Park?
That was Greg. That was Greg that wanted
Yeah,
to mention that.
That was a comment that we received from him. I think another reason that North Park has been mentioned in the conversation is just because, given the ordinance as it's written in the draft form, the 1,000-foot setback from, there's a chunk of North Park that's left at that point from existing structures. We did do a little map magic with that. So that's why it's been mentioned.
The trucks have to go through too much residential to get there and to get out. That's the problem I have with it. Too much residential. Where this is right on the main road.
Then the question, though, becomes from a zoning perspective from the town. Say that you put an overlay in this area by the old TGI Fridays going up to the CVS along McKnight. And someone actually says, okay, we will develop there. Is that the kind of development that the town wants in that particular location? Because
I
that's
would be
often the
stunned.
issue. You say, well, all right, we'll rezone your farm, or we'll create some overlay so that you can have drilling. Well, I want to sell this off to a developer for a residential subdivision. Drilling a gas well here is just going to kill the value because no one's going to want to do that. So that to me is the issue of the overall view of the zoning map and the zoning structure with the comprehensive plan of why are we denoting certain areas with certain uses to either authorize them or encourage them in certain places. And if it's I don't know about the contours of the development, but if it's in an area right off McKnight Road with residential and commercial and corporate, is that the place that the town wants to say, look, you can do this here? Because that'll create a dead zone.
I think the town would like to have it in Mars. We don't, I find it at Brandon, you've increased my vocabulary. I find it inherently objectable anywhere. But we have been told that I have been told that we have to find a place for it. Now, if that's not true,
It's right in the MPC, unfortunately.
Well, I'm just saying that there's this fair share doctrine, Brandon, this is all you, I'm quoting you to you, that says that no, we're built out and there is no place to put it. Therefore, we're not going to make a place for it because there's no place for it. So, I mean, how can we say, oh, I mean, I'm trying to be compliant with what you guys are telling me, but it doesn't make any sense to me to say, oh, what if we had a house on every parcel of land in this town? Every single one, there was a residence. Then do we say, oh, you could take this neighborhood, you just have to come in and buy all these people out? See, that's why this doesn't make any sense. We don't have the land for this. So why do we have to make a place for it? This is what I don't understand.
But you do have institutional property that gives you enough space to do it.
But they're in the middle of neighborhoods. So
That doesn't matter.
It does unless you want low birth weight infants.
Again, I'm playing the bad side of the game. I mean, you could put a well pad in North Park where the police training academy is, and not be near any residential places and be institutional.
So my question is, and this may be a point of either the solicitors looked at it or further, if you have a municipality like Dormont or Wilkinsburg or even a Mount Lebanon that is built out, there's not, a lot of fields, like in, I guess, what Cranberry used to be. Do you, as that municipality, for example, Dormont, do you have to provide for oil and gas development like this? Or can you, in that circumstance, say, look, we're a densely populated area. Our uses have existed. Our zoning map is what it is. We just can't shoehorn something in, whether it's a cemetery, whether it's a park, whether it's a church, even whether it's a golf course that might exist. Do you have the ability to say that and justifiably rely on that, or are you compelled to shoehorn every conceivable use in?
Not every conceivable use for sure, but as RJ pointed out, state law does require every zoning ordinance to contain provisions that provide for the reasonable development of mineral extraction. And this is something that your neighbors in Franklin Park raised in actually a really good letter, I thought, to the state legislature whenever they were going through this process. And they said, look, this makes no sense. We're doing this because we have to, because of this provision of the MPC and because of general exclusionary rules in the state of Pennsylvania for zoning. But this state law provision in the MPC was adopted and enacted prior to this use even existing. This thing is that law has been in place for decades. And so this no longer makes sense. And I agree with you. Now, the bottom line is the more restrictive and the more that you try to exclude this, more likely you are to be challenged. We all know that. So it really depends on sort of I mean, that's ultimately going to be the decision. If either by de jure, or in other words, the written ordinance itself, or de facto, that you put enough restrictions or replace this in an area where it couldn't actually happen, that you're potentially going to be subject to challenge. And you know, whether you win or not, we certainly would make the arguments, but you know, the way that this was initially set up for the institutional district was, I think, sort of the least worst scenario as it was viewed by council at that time. And really even this sort of last go around where we passed the pending ordinance. So, I mean, I can't say for sure how it would end up, but, you know, I think when it comes to mineral extraction, I think you have to, I've always said, you know, you really got to find a place for everything. And the state law is really clear about mineral extraction. So I think the industry would certainly have an argument, at least, at a place, especially the size of McCandless. You know, Dormont's a great question. Would they have a stronger argument than McCandless? I think so. But McCandless, you know, I don't know how many square miles it is, but to say that we can't find really any reasonable place to develop this particular use, I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough argument.
It's 16 square
Can
miles.
you rezone? Can you rezone the institutional into two subsets: schools, churches, cemeteries as one, and then parks for another? And then just more or less roll the dice and say, look, you can do it in a park. We're going to say we believe that a park is, you know, inherently the opposite of this. But if you want to get the publicity of hey, we're going to go drill in the park, have at it. But we're not going to expand that to churches, cemeteries, schools, universities, etc.
This is like opening a whole other can of worms that is not for 11 p.m. But I think that in the near distant future, my recommendation would be to rework the institutional district in general. Some uses, for example, churches, typically don't see those in a special zone. You know, might be a conditional use in R1, R2, and you know, in some commercial districts. Schools, there could be some sort of municipal, you know, again, institutional, or maybe they're even okay located in commercial, which is functionally where they actually are. Same thing for hospitals, universities. Parks, I do often see in some sort of special district or conservancy district. So that idea in general, I'm completely in support of kind of rethinking what we're doing with that district. But given what we got right now, you know, that's kind of where all the larger land parcels in town have ended up. And I keep looking at my zoning map over here.
Gavin, I don't know how to say this exactly, but if we had some a parcel of zoning and we had this use for fracking somewhere in the town and it wasn't actually usable, could someone come in and take a piece of property and say, I want to use this, and ram it down our throats in the court?
I mean, we could be, so if a court would determine that essentially it's de facto exclusionary, to your point, that we put it somewhere that it really could never happen, then they could file a curative amendment and seek, you know, site specific relief, and it could end up in a place where, you know, where you really don't want it. And that's one of the reasons.
Could they go after smaller sites that don't meet the you know, the area requirements and the distance requirements?
You know what, that gets a little more complicated. You know, it's sort of a combination of whether or not they would be entitled to variances based on physical characteristics of the property. So that's a tough question to answer, Ted. But you know, the reason why you try to sort of preemptively find a place is because you don't want it to end up in a place where it really would be problematic. That's
perhaps
sort of
the issue there is that placing it in a district or a zone area, whatever, in which the parcel sizes and the characteristics of the neighborhood and land make it very difficult to assemble a large enough piece of land, might lower the bar for what would be considered a hardship in a variance hearing. Is that accurate to say?
That's fair.
Because there's not a reasonable place you could do it otherwise without one, in theory.
Well, could they buy, somebody buy the parcels like where the driving range is and the little golf course is down there, and they bought it, and
And this is my newbie problem showing here, but by driving range, do you mean the one like right by town hall?
yeah,
Yeah, that's actually not zoned institutional. That's currently the front property is C1, one of the few C1 parcels we've got, and then behind that, that's R2 residential. So even if it's still just an institutional like it is right now,
yeah,
not eligible.
got it. Well, I just worried somebody gonna buy something up and then say,
Right.
yeah, we own this, rezone it.
They could petition for a rezoning, but that's in the hands of town council.
Yeah.
Just
the
to
standard-
sort of wrap things
standard
up, can you, RJ, can you recommend some properties for us for either an overlay district or rezoning or something at a future meeting?
Yeah, I'm definitely not prepared to do that tonight, but here's what I'll suggest. How about we take a straw poll for what exactly I give forth to council for what your recommendation is at this stage? Who would do, a particular zoning district or districts? Who would be in favor of exploring overlay? And we'll just kind of tally that up. Okay, so overlay, hands up.
If it's viable, I mean,
Yeah,
to draw a line on the map doesn't make it. I mean, I could support it if it looked like it made sense.
Right. So we're
Not
going to
sure.
say exploring the concept of overlay
Right.
at this stage.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, because I'm with Brendan. I'm not sure an overlay where TGI Friday. I don't think I'd like to see an oil well when I drive into McCandless the first thing.
Right,
Not
and since that would be a
wanna-
change to the zoning map, that would be a separate ordinance adoption, and that would come before this body for recommendation before it got passed, correct?
Or,
we don't want to look like Bradford.
yeah, Oil City. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I've got Ted, Rob, Dan, Jonathan for overlay. Okay, so we've got 4 there. What's your thinking, Jim?
If that's what we have to do, I can accept that.
Okay, so for maybe Jim. Let's at
And
least
the overlay
let's say
could
this is
include some
explore.
institutional, right, RJ?
It could.
Could include institutional property.
It could include anything.
Right.
Which is
So,
the
okay.
interesting,
Good, I got you. Okay.
So we've got Rob, Ted, Dan, Jonathan. I understand that carries the majority, but Brendan, I would like to hear your thoughts.
I would get a discrete zoning district because I just don't think overlaying gets you out of the having to rezone. I could see an overlay to the extent that we have an industrial and there's an overlay within the industrial for more intensive industrial. But otherwise, I think that you just have to establish it as a use, whether, conditional use in a certain zone where it's compatible with the other uses.
Okay, we'll record that for posterity and pass it along to the council. You had a lot of good comments about the whole district issue in general, so I don't want to, lose those in the overall recommendation. But okay, does anyone have anything else they'd like to bring up? I have 2 public comments on this that I have to read before the end of the meeting. I think the folks that provided them were sleepy and went to bed. but anything else for the good of the group before I do that?
No.
Oh,
Okay, we did it. The first one that I got was from Vincent Amatangelo. They're not here to tell me whether I'm pronouncing the name correctly, so we're gonna keep my streak going by default. From 8474 Post Road. I think several of these comments were answered in our discussion, but he said, is there language in the oil and gas ordinance to cover leaks into the atmosphere and responsibility for capped well to prevent and maintain leak-free piping? Are there requirements to keep noise levels during drilling and compression to acceptable levels? Yes. Are the gas and oil companies responsible for road and street damage? Yes. Are there requirements for safe disposal of fracking liquids? I think so.
Yes.
We've got nods here. And then the statement, the gas companies must be responsible for maintaining leak-free sites once the sites are abandoned. And the second comment we got was from Mary Ann Love from 701 Westchester Drive. She said, for one, thanks to all the volunteers for all your time and effort for us McCandless residents, and a special thanks to Kim for being such a fighter for us. And then she said, just a reminder, the PA grand jury report recommended requiring companies to publicly disclose all chemicals used in drilling and fracking before they are used on site, and also a 2,000-foot setback. That's what we got for public comment. Ted, I will make this.
Is that right? Is that right, Gavin? What
That
she
is what
said?
that is what the grand jury report recommended. Yes.
Well, that's what I asked be done for the citizens so they knew what the chemicals were. How come we
I
didn't?
know, I get you. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not a good idea, but that's not the state law. That's the grand jury had quite a lengthy list of recommendations that were well beyond what the state law provides. So there's no, that's not binding.
Okay. Oh, so that wasn't law. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Sorry.
Ted, I will make this super easy for you so we don't have to screen share. I've got a reminder that our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 5th, due to Election Day, falling on our typical meeting date of the first Tuesday.
We're not doing it on Wednesday, we're doing it Thursday?
That is what was apparently scheduled on the calendar at the beginning of the year. So
All right.
I think there's a technology committee meeting on Wednesday or something like that. So maybe that's why that happened. All I need from you all at this point is the approval of the August 4th minutes.
We have a motion.
I move to approve.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time tonight.
Really, thank you all. This was so much work. Thank you. I appreciate
It's just
it.
long.
Oh,
a lot of
man.
work.
I'm really
It's
glad that
it's
tomorrow is my work from home day.
There you go. There you go.
Hey.
It's not mine.
Good night,
All right,
everybody.
we done?
Thanks.
All right. Good night.